The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University, our book club. And today we're reading from Ralph Nader's Breaking Through Power. It's easier than we think. This is from page 74, the chapter How the System is Rigged. According to Russell Mokaber, editor of the Corporate Crime Reporter, quote, corporate crime takes far more lives, causes far more injuries and diseases, and steals far more money than street crime. But the vast amount of law enforcement resources, mass media attention, and prison cell blocks are devoted only to street crime. Just consider these preventable casualties. Almost 60,000 annual workplace-related fatalities from both disease and trauma. 54,000 deaths a year from air pollution. Over 100,000 lives lost as a result of medical malpractice. Nearly 100,000 lives lost from hospital-induced infections. Over 100,000 fatalities from adverse effects of drugs, and over 40,000 deaths every year due to inadequate or no health care coverage for diagnosis, treatment, and medication. There are far larger numbers of sicknesses and injuries attached to these data sets. These statistics have haunting human faces. Children, women, men, and families destroyed by uncontrollable, monetized minds. Whether they are caused by recklessness, criminal negligence, or worse, the key factors in common are the preventability of such pain and the suffering inflicted from commercially induced neglect, predation, manslaughter, and homicide. By comparison, street and home homicides do not exceed 14,000 lives lost annually. Now see how companies have made sure they have the laws that they need to go after you, and how they make sure that the law can be used as their punisher. The giant multi-tiered home mortgage business, now driven by the same one-percenters who profited from crashing the economy in 2008, can nail you if you misrepresent information on your mortgage application. Suppose you say you're going to occupy your house as a principal residence to get a lower interest rate and down payment, and you don't for some reason. Lenders can call the loan and demand repayment if the mortgage balance is outstanding. Absent that payment, the lender can seize your home, foreclosure. In addition, by claiming you committed bank fraud, these companies can use the FBI against you. As the veteran housing columnist Kenneth R. Harvey warned, this can trigger severe financial penalties, prosecution, and prison time for ordinary Americans. But how many bankers feel the cold metal of handcuffs tighten on their wrists when their crimes rob American families of their homes and life savings? Health insurance companies have similar supporting laws to deny medical coverage by alleging illegal activities. This could mean anything from non-disclosure of traffic violations to gun accidents, even when there has been no conviction. It could mean something as vague as hazardous behavior, according to the New York Times. If a company paid you and comes back for their money, they can get you prosecuted for fraud. These corporate Goliaths are too big to fail. If they know how to enact laws to make sure that you are, and they know how to enact laws to make sure that you are too small to stop them. Corporate state culture, the plutocracy oligarchy, is given an astonishing exoneration, so long as it claims that violence and mayhem are not their direct purpose, but an unfortunate byproduct that just couldn't be helped. Like when innocent people are accidentally killed by U.S. drone attacks, the government seems to quietly get a free pass. It's almost as if corporations get away with a permanent defense of an institutional insanity, a defense going global in terms of deadly supply chains, from horrific African mines to dangerous factories in China, in India, and Bangladesh. Deoxygenation and poisoning of the vast oceans, estuaries, rivers, and lakes. upping greenhouse gases into rapid climate destabilization, extending the range of infectious diseases due to habitat and ecological disruption and desecration, and changing the nature of nature itself through unregulated genetic engineering and nanotechnology. Even with 6 million slow, agonizing deaths a year globally attributed to the tobacco business, cigarettes are still demonically promoted by one-percenters who reap staggering profits from selling their addictive and poisonous product, especially in developing nations where regulations protecting children do not exist. The excuse is forever that corporatists have no intention, knowledge, or reason to do harmful things. The institutional insanity defense again. Or the manufacturers of weapons of mass destruction, whose militant advertisements say they are just helping the national defense, but are not at all responsible for their products' use in the coercive policies of empire and perpetual war. Is it institutional madness or infantilism? Did the World War II allies let the giant Krupp works in Germany get away with this excuse after the war ended? It's time for people to take away these rationalizations of omnicide from corporations that demand they be legally privileged as persons for their pursuit of profits, but not as persons for our pursuit of them as criminal predators and refugees from justice. In the 2012 U.S. presidential campaign, Republican nominee Mitt Romney, asked about corporate personhood, replied that it was a given, saying, "Hey, corporations are people, my friend," like it was a science fact he learned in 5th grade. This is no mere throwaway line. Billions of dollars of litigating, advertising, marketing, and corporatist commentary have been focused on driving this people image into our minds from childhood. Regularly, full-page ads show that Goliath corporations like Walmart or Lockheed Martin are just people like you. The ads are filled with pictures and names of the faithful workers who bring you goods and services.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
My friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And welcome, and I'm back. Thank you so much to Alex Lawson for filling in for me yesterday. It was yesterday was actually Louise's birthday, so we took the weekend and a bunch of freaking flyer miles and went to Portland and hung out with our kids and did karaoke Saturday night or Sunday night or something like that. So anyhow, so thank you, Alex, for that. Although Alex is not here, but still, thank you. So a couple of things that are at the top of the news here today. Number one is, of course, the Republicans have now rolled out their health care plan, and Donald Trump has already repudiated it, saying it's just the first version. Versions 2 and 3 will have things like selling insurance across state lines. And I'm going to get back to that in just a second because there's some really weird stuff around that. But the thing that even concerns me more is that we apparently have a president who is literally not. I mean, here's the guy who is in charge of, he's in charge of the CIA, he's in charge of the NSA, he's in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency. All of these are executive branch agencies. They're all, they don't work for Congress, they don't work for the courts, they work for the president. And he could pick up a phone and say, "Hey, did Obama order a wiretap of me?" And there should be somebody on the other end who can say authoritatively yes or no. But instead, he's getting his news from Fox News. And Fox so-called News is not a news channel. It's a propaganda channel for the Republican Party. So this morning, Fox News does a piece that says, it was 6:30 in the morning, that says, basically 122 detainees from Gitmo have been released who have gone back into the battle. Now, it being Fox News, they didn't bother to tell you that out of those 122, the vast majority of them were actually released. Actually, 113 of them were released by the Bush administration out of 122. And only 9 were released by Obama. And of those 9, by the way, he's killed 2 of them in the field. But, of course, Fox News wouldn't say that because that might make Obama look good and make Bush look bad. So they simply said 122, oh, my God, as a way of, kind of saying, oh, we need to keep Gitmo, right? But the president believed, I mean, the president believed the Fox and Friends, the Fox News report, exactly the way Fox News intended for the suckers out there, the Republican voters, to believe it, that, oh, it's all Obama's fault. And then Trump tweets it. And then his minions in the White House pick up his personal tweet and retweet it under the POTUS tweet. Yesterday or the day before, he was accusing, President Obama of spying on him, of tapping his phones, which apparently, according to the director of the FBI and the former director of National Intelligence, absolutely is not the case. And according to the law, Barack Obama does not have the power to pick up the phone and say, hey, I want you to wiretap Donald Trump or anybody in Trump Tower. Now, the FBI could do it if they had a warrant, but that would mean that they'd have to think that a crime was being committed, and they'd have to convince a judge of that. So which is it, Donald? Are you committing crimes there in Trump Tower, or is somebody else? In which case, it's probably a legitimate investigation. Or are you just making this stuff up because you're watching Fox so-called news, or you're listening to Mark Levin on right-wing radio? Or reading the Breitbart story that was based on Mark Levin's Connecting the Dots rant. Now, I'm not reciting all this by way of saying, oh, that stupid Trump or gotcha Donald or any of that kind of thing. I have a genuine concern, and I think you should too. I think all Americans should have a genuine concern that the President of the United States is getting his news from a Republican propaganda channel owned by a partisan billionaire. And because of that, and we know from this Northeastern University study from a year or two ago that people who watch Fox News are not only less well-informed than average people, or than people who watch no media, no television news at all, they're more malinformed. That is to say, not only do they not know things that are happening, but they believe things that never happened, which has gotten Trump into trouble now twice in the last 3 days. And as a consequence of this, I mean, there's a lot of people saying, so what happens when Fox News does a segment that, insults Donald Trump on behalf of Kim Jong-un, or suggests that, China or Russia or India or, you pick your country, right, have done something that Trump won't like. Is he, should this guy have the nuclear codes? Right-wing hate media traffics in grievance. It's always about, oh, we've been screwed by somebody. This is their coin of the realm, grievance. And as such, if you've got the President of the United States listening to that as his intelligence source rather than listening to the FBI or the CIA, we've got a serious problem here. Lawrence Tribe has gone so far as to say tweeting that Obama broke the law is an impeachable offense. Now, I doubt anything's going to happen with that, but it indicates a mindset, an intellect that, either he's losing it or he's paranoid, or, this is what happens to people who watch Fox News. I refer you to the brilliant documentary, The Brainwashing of My Dad. Meanwhile, the Republicans have rolled out their new health care plan. And Jason Chaffetz, in a refreshingly honest comment, this is clip number 1 here, Chris. Jason Chaffetz says, okay, you're going to have to start paying for this stuff yourself. The subsidies are going down. The prices are going to go up. So maybe if you're poor, you shouldn't buy that new iPhone. Here it is.
But access for lower-income Americans doesn't equal coverage.
Well, we're getting rid of the individual mandate. We're getting rid of those things that people said that they don't want. And you know what? Americans have choices, and they've got to make a choice. And so maybe rather than getting that new iPhone that they just love and they want to go spend hundreds of dollars on that, maybe they should invest in their own health care. They've got to make those decisions themselves.
Right. So, and the Republican plan is that, you know, if you're young and healthy, they're going to give you $2,000 a year to help buy yourself some health insurance. And, you know, you might be able to buy one of those policies that were legal before Obamacare where you think you have insurance, but in fact, you know, you've got like a $50,000 deductible. You're guaranteed to be wiped out if you get sick, but hey, you're only 20 years old, 25 years old. Odds are you're not going to get sick. That was the old scam, right? Well, it's now the new scam too. And the magic word, obviously Frank Luntz has come out and said, hey, here's the magic word, guys, access. Everybody has access to health insurance. Right. You know, I've got access to a city bus. It drives by every day. I could jump, you know, theoretically I could jump in and displace the driver, but I don't think he would like it. I'd probably go to jail. Let's see. I have access to the bank. There's an HSBC around the corner. There's a Bank of America on the other corner. It doesn't mean they're going to give me money. You know, I have access to the Mercedes dealership here in town. Doesn't mean I can afford to buy one of their cars. But the Republicans love to talk about access because they're not talking about health care. You will always notice the word access. And access means if you can afford it, great. If you can't afford it, you can look at it. You can dream of it. You can think about it. You can fantasize about it. You can pretend you have it. Isn't this marvelous? We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls. Stick around. And welcome back. Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
I want to talk about Trump care here for a minute to get a little bit off topic.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul Ryan released yesterday his health care plan that Trump himself said was his health care plan. And I've been looking at it. Basically, it's instead of a tax to the government, it's a tax to insurance companies. Let's see. So that's small government. Let's see what else. It cuts Medicaid, block grants Medicaid.
Right.
Let's see. It cuts off abortion funding for Planned Parenthood.
No, it cuts off Planned Parenthood altogether.
Yeah, altogether.
Yeah.
If you win the lottery, you can't be on Medicaid. So if you win like I don't know, $1,000 or something, goodbye.
Yeah.
It's basically just a total disaster of a bill from what I've been looking at so far. It's basically Obamacare, but only even worse. And I know there's some liberals out there who want to, try to defend Obama and Obamacare, but, we have to start really calling out this DLC, third way, Obama corporate part of the Democratic Party because, this was a Heritage Foundation bill that Mitt Romney passed in like the 2000s. And, we need to seriously start pushing for single-payer health care in this country instead of this kind of, quasi government private. I don't even know what to describe it because it's not free market health care.
Right.
And it's not
this is the problem, Jared, that the Republicans have, and that is that this is Obamacare is the Republican plan. And, for better or for worse, I mean, it was Joe Lieberman, and who's the definition of a DLC Democrat, who pulled out of the negotiations when he was on that, I forget which committee it was that Obamacare came out of. I think it might have been Commerce, but whatever it was, Joe Lieberman was there, and he was the one who shot down the public option. It was one vote short. Or otherwise, most of us would have already migrated to Medicare, and as the public option. But that battle is somewhat behind us. I think this battle is consequentially right ahead of us right now. So anyhow, back to you, Jared.
Do you think maybe the more conservative parts of the Republican Party could maybe try to delay the implementation of this bill? Because I don't know if they can pass it through reconciliation or not. I think they can, but I don't
think so. If they've lost Rand Paul, who's upset that it doesn't cut off more people's health care, and we'll see how many more Democrats or how many more Republicans that they can manage to upset. But basically, I mean, the Koch brothers, who own that wing of the Republican Party, right? The Freedom Caucus should rightly be called the Koch caucus, and they're opposed to any government involvement in health care, any whatsoever, and or at least historically were. I mean, when David Koch ran for president in 1980, that was certainly one of the platforms. It was just, get rid of Medicare altogether and any other form of support. So we'll see where this goes. Jared, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. That was one of Jason Chaffetz's comments. Here's another one. This is Chaffetz once again using the access, and when he is confronted by the CNN reporter, I thought, was this Carol Costello? I'm not real sure exactly who it was, but in any case, when he's confronted by the CNN reporter, who says, well, does that mean that it's going to cost more and fewer people will have coverage? And he falls back on the access trope. Here it is.
So we're going to try something different. We do think we can expand the coverage so that people have access to a quality healthcare product that they want.
More access, but possibly less coverage. That might be the byproduct.
Well, yes. Yes, I think that's fair.
Yes, less coverage. More access and less coverage. Oh, very, very strange. Very strange. Meanwhile, Planned Parenthood, they're trying to defund Planned Parenthood. And what astonishes me is the big lie that Paul Ryan is using to pitch this thing, right? I mean, he's been trying to defund Planned Parenthood forever, and to suck up to the right-wing voters, basically. And Paul Ryan, this is he says, and I quote, "For every Planned Parenthood, there are 20 federal community health centers. They're vastly bigger in network. There are so many of them, and they provide these kind of services without all the controversy surrounding this abortion issue." And that's Paul Ryan saying, for every Planned Parenthood clinic out there, there's 20 community health centers. Well, it's sort of true. I mean, keep in mind, if you want a pap smear or a mammogram, you got to go well, you don't have to go to Planned Parenthood, but Planned Parenthood is one of your options, or if you want birth control counseling or even birth control. But the 20-to-1 federal community health centers that Paul Ryan is quoting, that includes dentists' offices. Yes, dentists are community health care providers. I don't know if you want to go to your dentist to get an IUD. It seems like, the wrong end. But, apparently in Paul Ryan's world, that works.
Homeless shelters, these are considered community health centers by Paul Ryan. So, all the homeless shelters around America are considered, okay, I'm going to go down to the homeless center and, get a pap test. Food banks are community health centers, according to Paul Ryan. He counts them in that total. So, it's been a long time since I went to a food bank to get my immunization or my vaccine or my, but any woman who wants her HPV vaccine, hey, go to your community health bank. Oh, and cosmetic surgeons, all the plastic surgeons in the country, they're considered community health providers. Right. And mental health clinics. Okay. Now, to the best of my knowledge, none of these places offer contraceptive services. And in fact, this from a piece in Huffington Post by Laura Bassett, she writes, in 2014, federally qualified health centers only provided about a third of the contraceptive services that Planned Parenthood did, according to the Congressional Research Service, which is, the Congressional Research Service is just purely a library function that operates on a completely nonpartisan basis and answers to members of Congress. Yeah, 1/3. And the average wait time for an appointment at these health centers is more than twice the wait time at Planned Parenthood, which could be deadly for a woman like Jamie Benner, who found a lump in her breast in 2013. Benner, then unemployed and insured member of 2 in rural upstate New York, says that when she called her local Planned Parenthood clinic to tell them she felt a lump, they shuffled around their appointments and got her in the same day. They did a breast exam and referred her to a radiologist, and she discovered she had an aggressive breast cancer. It was already in her lymph glands. The mastectomy saved her life. She says, without Planned Parenthood, I would be dead. Literally, where I live, everything is a 3-week to 2-month wait list. I wouldn't have been able to get in anywhere, anytime, and no one would have helped me get Medicaid. I would be dead. So apparently, this is part of the new Republican health care plan. The way that Planned Parenthood, by the way, gets their money is by accepting Medicaid payment for services. So if a poor woman who is on Medicaid, say, working a couple of jobs, but, is making so little that she qualifies for Medicaid, if she goes into Planned Parenthood and, gets whatever kind of, women's health services are that she personally needs, then, just like somebody on Medicare or with health insurance, you go to the doctor's office, you go to a clinic, you give them your insurance card. She would present her Medicaid information, her Medicaid number, and they'd bill Medicaid. That's how they get their money. So here we've got all these healthcare centers all over the country that are specifically set up to meet the needs of women. And all these men in Congress, all these Republican men in Congress want to say, no, Medicaid dollars can no longer be used to pay for contraceptive services, for mammogram, for breast exams, for preventative health care, none of that kind of stuff. Trump care looks like it's really going to work out well, all right? As long as you are wealthy and male, and presumably white. But, the wealthy part, I think, is the important part. We'll be back with your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
How is Trump care going to affect you? Your calls after this. If you are listening to me on a commercial radio station right now, please start listening carefully to the commercials. And, say you hear a commercial for a local furniture company and you have no intention of buying furniture because you don't need it or you can't afford it, but you heard the ad. Call up that furniture company and say, I don't have the money right now to buy new furniture, but I promise you that I'm going to tell my friends about you, that you support fill in the blank station, KTNF, WCTP, you name it, right? That you support this station, and I'm gonna, and I want to thank you for supporting them. I got to tell you, I meet these business owners when I go to station events, station owners who have been supporting our progressive stations. and business owners. And typically they're local businesses. Progressive stations tend not to get so much advertising from the big corporations and much more advertising from the small local businesses, which I think is a marvelous thing. And they will tell you if they get 1 or 2 calls a week from somebody, I'm not talking about customers, but from people saying, hey, I heard your ad on, it really makes their day. It makes a big deal. It's a big difference. If you're listening on a non-commercial station, if you're listening on one of our many Pacifica affiliates, from KPFK, the biggest FM station in the United States in Los Angeles, through KBCS up in Seattle, just a powerhouse up there, XRFM in Portland, all the way to our stations in North and South Carolina. I mean, we're all over the country, right? If you're listening to one of them and they're in a pledge drive, help them out. Toss some money their way. If you're watching Free Speech TV, participate in the pledge drive. If you're listening to Sirius XM and you hear advertisers, contact those advertisers and say thank you for supporting Sirius XM's progressive channel. There are these are just really simple things that you can do with 5 minutes once every couple of weeks that actually have a big impact. And then, of course, make the commitment to tell 5 people you know about the fact that, hey, there is progressive media out there and progressive websites. This morning I tweeted it out. This morning I read just this great piece by George Monbiot over at The Guardian. Now, The Guardian isn't always the most progressive publication, but they're quickly becoming my primary mainstream media news source here in the United States, because they do good stories that, and they don't just follow, they don't just chase the latest shiny thing. And so I made a small donation to them this morning, and I tweeted it out, and people are tweeting back at me going, oh, The Guardian, they're not that good. Well, no, I also support a bunch of other progressive websites too. But, and I just, today I didn't tweet about that, but, we can all do this. We need progressive media in the United States. We need these issues to be talked about. This is a critical time. This is a really critical time. And, in a couple of weeks, well, month and a half, almost 2 months, we're going to have a new president, and something's going to start happening. And, I'm not going to make predictions, and I don't want to sound like, Cassandra here. Well, Cassandra's the wrong example because she turned out to be right. But, I don't want to sound like Alex Jones and just lay conspiracy theories on you. But there's a big challenge coming, and we need to get ready for it. And Elizabeth Warren is right, rolling over and playing dead and saying, gee, Mr. Trump, what would you like me to do? I'll be a good Democrat, and I'll keep my mouth shut. That's not the way to do it. Now, the other way not to do it is to create the circular firing squad and start saying, okay, let's attack Democrats for either not being pure enough or being too pure. Right? Whether it's my picking on Joe Manchin, which I've done a couple of times, and I actually, I've met Joe a couple of times. I can't say I know him, but we're neighbors. And I think he's a good guy. I disagree with some of his policies, but thank God, we've got a Democrat from West Virginia in the Democratic coalition, even though I disagree with him on a lot of his positions. And on the other hand, you got Elizabeth Warren and Bernie in the Senate. You got the entire House caucus, progressive caucus. We can support. We just need to be supporting the party and working toward the classic ideals of the Democratic Party. And in the coming days, particularly over the holidays, as kind of the news cycle dials down a little, and because there's some amazing stuff I want to share with you today that is the news cycle, but I just wanted to get this whole media rant off my chest. I want to go back to playing for you, because we've got a lot of new listeners and viewers, back to playing for you some of my favorite FDR clips and Lyndon Johnson clips to remind us what the Democratic Party really is. And thank God there are those people in the Democratic Party, because in the Republican Party, the Everett Dirksons of the Republican Party, the high integrity, genuine conservatives in the Republican Party who used to actually put America first. I'd even put Barry Goldwater in that category, and I realize it's a very unpopular position for any progressive to take. But Barry Goldwater, Everett Dirksen, those guys are dead and gone. The Republican Party is filled with shills for billionaires and oil companies, period.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And this is going to get where it's getting really interesting, because Trump came in without that baggage, but he's filling his cabinet with it, which is a really bad sign. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The old subsidies under Obamacare, which used to have to do with how much money you make. So, it would provide a subsidy for your health insurance based on, if you're poor, it's basically to deliver free health insurance to you. If you're, in the middle, it's to deliver very discounted health insurance to you. And if you're very wealthy, it's to, you can buy the health insurance, right? That's being replaced under this initial Trump Care plan with tax credits that basically that are age related. So if you're in your 20s, it's like $2,000 a year. If you're in your 50s or 60s, it's like $4,000 a year. I don't know anybody who's 60 years old who could buy a health insurance policy for $4,000 a year. I'm not sure anybody 40 years old with any kind of medical history. And of course, if you've ever been sick, forget it. This is bizarre where this is all going. Sam in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Hey, Sam, what's on your mind today? Sam, you are on the air.
Thank you. Sorry, I got my phone messed up. Let me put you on the radio phone. So I am a white male that moved here from Pennsylvania to New Mexico. The healthcare here is just ridiculous, and I've been living with HIV since 1982. I was diagnosed in 82, and then AIDS in 92, and I have no job and I have no money. I'm living with my husband. He's the one who can support me because he has early retirement. But is this thing going to screw the hell out of me or what? I mean, it feels like I'm not going to be able to get the stuff I need to survive.
Yeah, Sam, my sense of it is that if they pass this, that actually may be the case, which is a terrible, terrible outcome. The good news is that this is tearing the Republican Party apart. The conservatives are saying, wait a minute, you're giving tax credits to people. You're taking taxpayer dollars. You're going to take what little the Koch brothers are paying in taxes. Well, actually, maybe it's a lot. What the Koch brothers are paying in taxes, and you're going to use that money to help people, poor people get insurance. We can't have that. So you've got that with the so-called Freedom Caucus, right? And the Rand Paul libertarian faction. And then you've got, a couple of Republicans, and I'm waiting to hear from Susan Collins on this, but Lisa Murkowski, and there have been 4 Republican senators now who have come out and said, if this thing involves ending Medicaid in 2020, and if you're super low income, Sam, I'm guessing you're getting your health care through Medicaid?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You've got 4 Republicans. You've got 4 Republicans.
Give it to me right away. I asked for it because every state I've lived in, I've asked for it, and I've always gotten it with no problem. And here, they issued it to me like 4 months before I ever got a card, and they didn't even tell me they issued it to me. So I got bills that came from the hospital when I went in and everything.
Yeah. Well, with regard to Medicaid, you've got several Republican states or states that have Republican senators have expanded Medicare. Or Medicaid, excuse me. And so now you've got, and I'm sorry, I don't have the list right here in front of me. I remember Murkowski from Alaska. But there's 3 others. There's 4 senators altogether who are Republicans, and they're going to have, there's arguably 51 Republican votes in the Senate. They're going to have to have everybody, all hands on deck, or at least 50, with Mike Pence. And it looks like between the Republicans who don't want Medicaid undone and the Republicans who think that, giving any kind of, this, like I said, this is just, and now you've got the president tweeting out that, this isn't the final product yet, because somebody pointed out to him that it doesn't allow sales across state lines, which basically, destroys states' rights to have insurance commissioners and set their own standards. And so, Trump is saying, oh, no, this is just a negotiation, right? We're still going to fix this. So, Sam, don't despair. Don't despair. The cavalry's coming. All across the spectrum. I mean, Democrats universally are opposed to this. The American people are. People are showing up in these town halls. We all need to be raising hell on your behalf, Sam, and everybody in a situation similar to yours, who's literally, Harvard University Their study was, before Obamacare, 45,000 people a year were dying in the United States because they lacked health care.
Yeah, my husband has Obamacare. Well, he did have Obamacare, and now he's turned 65, so he has Medicare. Yeah. And hopefully that's going to go on for a while because, I mean, we both are in the same situation.
Yeah.
What do they want me to do? Go out and sit out in front of the White House and die? I mean, I could do that.
Well, except that they would arrest you for sitting out in front of the White House. I mean, that's they're starting to dial back our civil protections as well. But yeah, I mean, this is a serious problem. Sam, I've got to move along, but thank you for the call and for sharing your story with us. It's a powerful one, a compelling one. I appreciate it. Gant in Thompson Station, Tennessee. Hey, Gant, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
I was haven't called you in a while. Thanks for taking my call. I'm a studio musician in Nashville, but I also have kidney disease and I'm on kidney dialysis. I go 3 days a week. And I'm also, even though I'm only 50, I'm covered by renal patients are covered by Medicare. So I have Medicare and I have Cigna. My wife works at the school board, and she's a special ed teacher. And fortunately, we have really good insurance. And I was never the kind of guy to buy the kind of insurance my wife does. Thank God that we purchased a lot. In fact, I was opposed to it before I got sick. Now I'm glad we did. And I guess the point I'm making is, number one, this new law is going to put the insurance companies back in charge, which is a really bad thing. And this, downsizing of Medicare is really going to eventually hurt me, and it's going to hurt many people. The cost of my dialysis is about $500,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. I'm probably going to go to home health pretty soon. And I'm just, I'm really frightened by this law. I'm also really frightened by the fact that not many people really, really understand, people that are Republicans, they don't understand the ramifications of this law and what it means to be a sick person. I'm going to be a sick person the rest of my life. Even when I get a transplant, I will be a kidney patient the rest of my life.
Right.
And I'm the kind of person that does need Medicare. I'm willing to pay for it. And I'm willing to – I feel like the kind of insurance I have now is the kind of insurance every human being on the planet needs to have. And I think these petty arguments and rules that the sicko Republicans are, trying to break little bits and pieces of our rights in the healthcare department and also in education and everything else, it's sickening to me.
Yeah.
I mean, Europe is laughing at us, and
Canada.
Canada's laughing at us. They are, and another thing, a lot of the southern people in the South, the blue collar element especially, they hated Obama, and they do not distinguish between. They say they hate Obamacare, but they don't realize Obamacare and the ACA are the same.
More than half of Republican voters think Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are two separate things. And I would bet that it's more like 80% of Fox News viewers. And, that's the scary thing, which gets me back to we have a misinformed president as well. Gant, thank you for the call. Thanks for sharing your story.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls right after this break. Stick around. And welcome back. Ivory, watching us on YouTube in Oroville, California. Hey, Ivory, what's on your mind today?
Sorry. So I was going over and some of the things that were going on with the Affordable Care Act and stuff, and I seen that the richest 400 families in the United States were going to save $7 million apiece.
Right.
So they would rather save these families $7 million apiece, which is a penny out of their pockets, than supply health care for people who need it.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, when are people going to realize that this is pretty much just a get-rich-quick scheme? You know, because I think the Republicans know that this isn't going to last. You know, it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
But
or a get-richer-quick scheme.
Exactly.
I mean,
so when are people going to realize that all of this, everything he's doing, from his infrastructure, you know, everything is all centered around making people more money?
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem of it. I mean, that was the problem, arguably, with Obamacare. And had Joe Lieberman not, refused to supply a vote for a public option, like I said earlier, most of us would probably be on Medicare right now. But because Lieberman blew that up on behalf of his patrons in the health insurance and banking business, no doubt, here we are. We have a commercial health insurance-based healthcare system in the United States, and at least what the Obama administration did, or what Congress did with Obamacare, was put enough fencing around the bad behavior of the health insurance companies that they couldn't continue to kill people for profits. And now the Republicans want to remove that fence. They want to tear down those protections. They want to throw us back onto the tender mercies of the health insurance companies purely, and say, you get to negotiate with the health insurance company. We're not going to set the rules. You set the rules. And yeah, right, each one of us, one at a time, we're all going to negotiate with multi-billion-dollar corporations. Really?
Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense. And, you look at some of what he wants to do with infrastructure spending. He wants to toll our roads for profit for big corporations and stuff like that. He wants to increase all of the border security, because that's going to give money to bigger corporations and stuff like that. That supplies the gear for these things. So, I feel like, we need to take profit out of healthcare. That's the only way we can have healthcare for everybody and be able to make it through this thing.
Yeah, I agree.
That's pretty much the only way.
It used to be in, I think it was every state. If it wasn't, it was in most states. It used to be that it was illegal to run a hospital on a for-profit basis, and it was illegal to run an insurance company, a health insurance company, on a for-profit basis. They had to be not-for-profit. I know that was the case in Michigan in the 70s. I was running businesses in Michigan in the 70s, and we were buying our health insurance from Blue Cross Blue Shield, which was a not-for-profit, a nonprofit. And all the hospitals in town were non-for-profit. One, Ingham Medical, was owned by the county. Sparrow, I think, St. Lawrence was owned by the Catholic Church. Sparrow was owned by, was its own nonprofit. And now I'm pretty sure all three of those hospitals in Lansing are for-profit. And the health insurance companies are all going for-profit. And guess what? Our costs for health insurance or health care have exploded. You're right, Ivory. Thank you a lot. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Marianne in Everett, Michigan. Hey, Marianne, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, hang on a sec, please. I want to take you off speaker.
Thank you.
Hi. I just wanted to enlighten people also to the fact, because there are still millions of people that don't have insurance or may find themselves in a scenario where they can't afford to pay for it for whatever reason for a couple of months. And the way that they've gotten rid of the mandates, so to speak, is that if you do not have coverage for 2 consecutive months, the insurance companies are going to be allowed to charge you an additional 30% on your premium.
Right, and you know how that's going to translate, Marianne? Now, I may be wrong on this, and maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I'm guessing a lot of the health insurance companies are going to be kind of slow sending their bills out. And if you get...
So that you... Oh,
right.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right, so if you get your bill... you get your bill on the third week of the month, and you've got, 5 days to pay it, and you forget. So gotcha.
Well, and that's true because I've been dealing with them for almost 3 decades, and they are sly when it comes to figuring out how to make more money for their stockholders.
Absolutely, and they are not going to be, they're if they have an opportunity to make an extra 30%, which will all go to the bottom line, it'll all be profit. You can bet they're going to change their billing. They're going to make it harder to do things like auto pay or auto bill to my credit card, that kind of thing. Auto take it out of my checking account. A lot of people have that kind of stuff set up for existing health insurance policies or Medicare or whatever. And, if they're going to make an extra 30% by refusing to allow that, these companies are craven. They are banksters. They're just pure and simple banksters, and they make their profit by us getting less health care. And it's just, talk about perverse incentives. This is just terrible. So
I will quote POTUS, or as I call him, GLOTUS, and
GLOTUS.
just say sad.
Yeah, or the so-called ruler of the U.S., the SCROTUS. Yeah, good one. Mary Ann, thank you very much for the call. Scott in Canaan, Maine. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Good.
Hey,
what's up?
Couple things. I'm wondering how you feel about with Obamacare. If that was, if he would have kept that as a government program. I got to turn you down. If he would have kept that as a government program instead of giving it to the insurance companies to implement,
right,
that probably would have been a workable program.
508.
My second thing, Tom.
Scott, just let me give you a data point here. The difference between all of our health insurance in this country being provided by Medicare, in other words, everybody on a single payer system, and what we have right now, which is where about 2/3 of all the health care in the country are provided by for-profit health insurance companies, or something close to that. I'm not sure exactly what the fraction is, but whatever it is right now, we are spending an additional $508 billion every year just subsidizing these for-profit health insurance companies, much of it in the form of profit for them, dividends for their stockholders, but also all the administrative costs that's associated with that. Most doctors' offices have a couple of people who just handle paperwork. That could be one part-time person if you had a single-payer system. Hospitals have an entire floor of people dedicated to paperwork. In hospitals in Europe and in Canada, they have maybe one person with one desk who does it for the entire hospital. It's $508 billion a year we would save. That's almost the budget of the Defense Department. It's the Pentagon's budget that we would save every year just by going to single-payer health care. Tell me how that's not the conservative option. Back to you, Scott.
I agree completely, Tom. I'm just wondering, everybody's yelling about it, if it would have stayed government instead of giving it to the insurance, because that's all insurance.
Well, it wasn't government before, but we've never had single payer or socialized medicine in this country outside of the Veterans Administration and Medicare.
Well, my other thing was,
I'm listening. Scott, I think your phone just croaked. Yeah, Scott just vanished. Holly in Iron Mountain, Michigan. Hey, Holly, what's up?
Oh, good afternoon, Tom. I have a experience to relate to you. I developed cirrhosis of the liver before I was 65 years old. I have Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, which is still a nonprofit, and applied for a liver transplant. And they refused me because I'm diabetic, and they just said, go home and die.
Whoa.
And the minute I turned 65, my doctor applied to Medicare and UW-Madison for a liver transplant, and I was approved.
Wow.
So Medicare saved my life. Otherwise, I would not be here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
they just flat out turned me down because they said basically the doctor told me that you're not worth saving.
That's incredible. At least in the minds of the health insurance company.
Well, Blue Cross Blue Shield just said, no, you're diabetic and you're 64 years old. Go away. And the minute I turned 65, it was a whole different story. Medicare said, yes, of course.
Amazing.
You can have one.
Amazing.
And I'm still alive. I'm 72.
Wow. So you got a liver transplant?
I got a liver transplant, and I am relatively healthy. My liver is fantastic. So Medicare is saved my life.
That's amazing. Holly, thank you for sharing your story with us. That's a remarkable one. Gail in Tahunga, California. Am I saying it right?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Gail.
My topic is basically, before I'm a self-employed person, all these people complain that say that people that have the Affordable Care Act or have subsidies are all out of work. I work 6-7 days a week, self-employed. I have coverage through the Covered California, and I love it. And now I know that there needs to be tweaking on it, but just having everything go to a voucher system or tax credits, I see no way of this getting better. I see this as a way to get rid of people that are poor and older and unhealthy. And it's kind of like a Scrooge mentality of getting rid of the surplus population. I don't like it. I think it's inhumane. What about you, Tom?
I think it's inhumane, but I don't think that they're doing it to try and get rid of surplus population. I think they're doing it because they're trying to extract as many dollars as possible out of the American middle class and the working poor, and to stop the transfer of money from wealthy people via their taxes to very poor people in the United States. This has been the Republican, mantra since the 1880s and continues to be to this day, with the one brief exception of the Teddy Roosevelt presidency. And but functionally, I mean, the effect of it is to cause people to die in order to make more profit. And that's the thing. Healthcare is serious stuff. So, Gail.
So my brother has pancreatic cancer, and we're completely out of additional money for a non-FDA approved program, and we're trying to get $40,000 for this. But that's just one point: is that you don't ask to get cancer. And having credit for your, taxes for medical care, it has no concept of the unknown.
Yeah.
And like you said, a single health care system where everyone has the same insurance as our federally funded congressman and president and all of the senators. It's not right, and I just don't see a way out of this. Yeah. And I see more people dying, and I don't have an answer, but I just wanted to share with you that it's helped me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good thing, and we're hearing lots of stories like that, and people. It's like you say, it's not a perfect system. We're still offering a $500 billion a year subsidy to the health insurance companies, which, in my opinion, should not even exist, at least with regard to for primary health insurance. But Gail, thank you for the call. Thanks for sharing your story with us. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. We'll be back. Neil McCabe is going to drop by. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Our book today is Walking Your Blues Away, How to Heal the Mind and Create Emotional Well-Being. And we're reading, starting on page 2 in the introduction. The human body is a self-healing organism. When you cut your finger, it heals. If you break your leg, it heals. Even if part of you is cut out in surgery, the surgeon's wound heals. We heal from bacterial and viral invasions, from injuries, from all variety of traumas. The mechanisms of healing are built into us. 5 million years of evolution or the grace of God or both have made our bodies automatic healing machines. So why wouldn't the same be true of our minds and our emotions? All of the traumas that we experience in life leave their wounds. If humankind hadn't had ways of healing from those emotional and psychological blows, over time society would have become progressively less functional. Instead, history shows us that people usually recover from even the most severe psychological wounds, often learning great lessons or gaining important insights in the recovery process. The famous Kauai, Hawaii longitudinal study of children raised in stressful, disadvantaged conditions, they were migrant farm workers, found that a higher percentage of the children grew up to be highly resilient than did a middle-class control group. The generation that survived the Great Depression and the Nazi Holocaust in Europe went on to create important social institutions, build nations, and offer comfort and hope to humankind. Elie Wiesel's experience specifically comes to mind, although he never would have wished on another the horrific experience of being in one of Hitler's death camps. Through his writing of that experience, he has given a particularly inspiring model of resilience and healing to the world. The reality is that although adversity breaks some people, it strengthens others. And when people heal from adversity, the old cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger usually rings true. But just as with the production of scar tissue in the healing of a wound to the skin, a process involving millions of cells producing very specific compounds in response to the trauma in the tissue, there must be an inborn mechanism for healing the mind and the emotions. And just as healing from a cut can be speeded up by keeping the wound dry, or can be slowed down by letting the wound get wet or dirty and irritated, this emotional healing is also a process that can be either stimulated or thwarted by our interventions. In this book, I've identified a specific healing mechanism and process that nature has built into the human mind and body that enables us to process trauma in a way that is quick, functional, and permanent. Just like the skin's mechanism for forming scabs and scars and eventually even making the scars vanish, this mechanism is simple, fundamental, and elegant. In its simplest form, this mechanism involves rhythmic side-to-side stimulation of the body. This side-to-side motion, or bilateral motion, causes nerve impulses to cross the brain from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere and back at a specific rate or frequency. This cross-patterning produces an organic integration of left hemispheric thinking functions with right hemisphere and brainstem feeling functions. This integration is a necessary precursor to emotional and intellectual healing from trauma. This steady movement of nerve impulses across the hemispheres of the brain is stimulated by the bilateral movement processes of a variety of modern forms of psychotherapy, such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR, emotional freedom technique, and thought field therapy. In its purest form, however, I've discovered that the natural and rhythmic left-right process of walking while performing a simple mental exercise can also stimulate the same internal integration process. This, I posit, is the way humans have healed themselves for trauma
for the hundreds of thousands of years of human history. And it's only because so few of us walk anymore that we have to resort to office-based psychotherapeutic processes to produce a similar result. And that result is impressive. When we stimulate the nervous system in this bilateral manner while calling to mind a persistent emotional distress, the emotional charge associated with that memory quickly and permanently dissipates. This isn't a process of producing amnesia or forgetting. Instead, it's a way of reframing the past, a way of re-understanding or putting into context what has been so unnerving to us. When we perform this bilateral process correctly, the pictures of painful past events in our memory transforms from stark, scary, sound-filled color movies into black and white still pictures that are flattened out and lose their sound. The internal dialogue we have about the events, the tagline that we tell ourselves, and actually hear in our own heads and in our own voices, changes, usually from something like, that was a painful experience that still scares me, or I was victimized in that relationship, to a more productive synopsis, such as, yes, that happened to me, but it's well in the past now, and I've learned some good lessons from the experience. I can now let go of it. Inciting the movement of nerve impulses across the brain's hemispheres helps people come to terms with their past. They stop being frightened by their imagined futures and feel comfortable and empowered in the present. Walking while holding a traumatic memory in mind in a particular way can produce this result in a very short time. And the book goes on to talk about how exactly to use simple walking, just going out for a 20-minute walk, which is physically good for you. Use that simple walking and combine it with a very specific set of mental exercises that Sigmund Freud and Franz Anton Mesmer and others first discovered years ago. Walking your blues away.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and pleased to have in the studio with me Neil W. McCabe, political reporter with Breitbart News, Breitbart.com. You can tweet Neil at Neil W. McCabe, M-C-C-A-B-E. Neil, welcome back.
Tom, very glad to be with you. I have an unscheduled plug.
Okay.
I just want to shout out to all of my left-wing peeps in Somerville, Massachusetts, and I know they're listening, that I hope they support Matthew McLaughlin, Ward 1 Alderman.
Okay.
That is all.
All right. Is that a Breitbart position or a Neil McCabe position?
That is a Neil McCabe position. I don't think Matt has. Matt was a Army Public Affairs soldier. We were at the Defense Information School together. We agree on virtually nothing.
So he's a progressive.
Oh, he's very progressive.
You're endorsing a progressive?
Yeah, but you see at the local, there's no progressive view on like lights. Should the lights be fixed? Right? Should we have books? It's like,
well,
should
actually,
the potholes?
there are a lot of local stuff is being, our power systems are being privatized. Our septic systems are being privatized.
Having said that, I just do want to make the point that at the local level, the closer you are to the people, the less you get caught up in.
You're willing to support a progressive who you actually know.
Absolutely, yeah, he's a great guy. Great guy. Matt McLaughlin, Ward 1.
All right. Chris, can we pull clip one of Jason Chaffetz? Can you get that? Okay. You've heard this?
I saw his Fox and Friends, which was very positive. And
of course it was.
Wonderful yesterday.
Yeah.
I didn't have time to see it today, but I understand he's wandered off the reservation.
This was on CNN. Check this out.
But access for lower income Americans doesn't equal coverage.
Well, we're getting rid of the individual mandate. We're getting rid of those things that people said that they don't want. And you know what? Americans have choices, and they've got to make a choice. And so maybe rather than getting that new iPhone that they just love and they want to go spend hundreds of dollars on that, maybe they should invest in their own health care. They've got to make those decisions themselves.
Right. So don't buy an iPhone, buy health insurance. Right now you can get an iPhone with a plan for, what, $25 a month?
I think that's what they're banging us for. Yes,
I've never even. I mean, since '73, I've never heard of a $25 a month health insurance policy that was worth anything. Is this really the Republican pitch now? This is your sales pitch? You know, don't buy an iPhone, buy health care.
I think that
buy health insurance. Excuse me.
Everything has to be seen in context of what we're dealing with. That no one thinks that what they ginned up in 2009, 2010 was what should be or was a good idea. And yet the idea that the smartest guys in the world dealing with healthcare were the clowns working for Max Baucus and the guys in the White House who put together what we know as the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And after 7 years, there are significant lessons learned, and I'm hoping that some of those are applied when we repeal and replace this law.
So we have the risk corridors that Marco Rubio famously got
defunded.
Right, he defunded this, which immediately threw all of the health insurance companies into, many of them, into a loss situation, which has caused now almost a third of the counties in the United States to only have one option under Obamacare. This was intentional sabotage of the Affordable Care Act by Marco Rubio and a group of Republicans. I mean, it took more than just him, but he was the one who proposed it. Why is that never mentioned in the media, that Obamacare is, to the extent that it's failing because of something Republicans did?
Well, I mean, President Barack Obama had many failings during his failures during his 8 years. One of his failings was his inability to persuade people in Congress to go along. And so he would just do it himself. He's like, why should I have to convince these idiots? I'm just going to do it myself.
I don't think you're answering my question here.
Well, the risk corridors were never, it was never appropriated. It was never authorized by Congress.
Actually,
so
it was. What the budget did was deauthorized it.
What Obama was doing is Obama was actually, he was spending money that wasn't actually authorized.
No, it was. Rubio had to take it back out of the budget.
No.
That's why it was attached to the budget bill of 2016.
I remember specifically what was going on, and Rubio was clarifying it, and he was enforcing a clawback. Right. He was enforcing a clawback, and certainly, but to the bigger point, Tom, President Obama was unable to persuade.
Let me just get this straight. So you're saying that the Republican destruction of Obamacare is because of Obama. That's his fault. That Obamacare isn't perfect, and that's President Obama's fault.
Yes. Yes, it is his fault. Well, whose fault would it be?
Well,
I mean, it's his signature.
I would say, had the Republicans gone along with, even one Republican with, for example, a public option.
Well, and Susan Collins voted with Obama once in committee.
In committee, but not on the floor of the Senate. And that's where Joe Lieberman withdrew his support for the. But Joe Lieberman was not a Republican, but any Republican could have. But so basically, Neil, you're in the position of defending a situation where more and more people are going to find that, number one, their premiums are going up. Number two, their coverage is going down. Number three, their health insurance companies, if they miss paying their bill for 2 months, or if they're 2 months late on paying their bill, and I'm predicting now the health insurance companies are going to start billing a month late. But if they miss it by 60 days, then the rates can go up 30%. You have no control over that. So the health insurance companies have this huge stimulus to figure out ways to screw you and to avoid things like auto pay. All this stuff, this seems indefensible. I don't see how Republicans are gonna survive politically by basically trying to screw the American people.
It would be unconscionable for the Republicans not to address the problems that Obamacare caused. Essentially, this bill has been unchanged since it was passed since 2010.
You are addressing those problems by block granting Medicaid to the states, which is going to cut back on the care that a lot of Americans...
And empower the governors.
Empower the governors, right? Yeah, that works. That always works so well, doesn't it? We know that that's a.
We're moving power closer to the people,
not just
talking. You and your Washington egghead solutions.
Right. So the people in rural, broke West Virginia, it's just like, hey, we're just moving it to you in the state, you in Mississippi with an average.
Well, they elect the governor there, sir.
And it's a country that is.
They have a state legislature,
that is
and they
so
all
wealthy.
But the local politicians are closer to the people, so it's never a mistake to move things closer to the people.
Unless the people.
I mean, I'm speaking as a Democrat. I'm not speaking as some liberal, fancy autocrat who just wants to decide everything from Washington.
So, and the history of that is that poor counties and poor states have crappy school systems because of the logic that you're promoting, that you want them to now have crappy Medicare, that they've had, very, very spotty enforcement of any kind of right to vote, states' rights.
Now, on behalf of crappy everything, Neil W. McCabe.
There you go.
That's the Thom Hartmann explanation.
This is what I'm hearing from you, Neil, is that is you're defending it because I don't understand. I don't understand the Republican compulsion to say, if the government can do something well, then we have to figure out a way for somebody to make $508 billion a year in profit off it, because that's the additional cost of a healthcare system that's based on for-profit insurance companies. We're spending $508 billion a year more than we would if we simply had Canada's
Why
system.
are you deaf to the cries of the people suffering from Obamacare? The people
I'm not hearing them.
You're callous. You're callous to Americans.
From people
Americans who are suffering.
You're
small
being
businesses. I'm not being facetious, because what you have is like
I have a small business here, and we're getting great health care on the Obamacare exchange.
Listen.
It costs us a lot less than it did
Washington
before.
is booming, and you're booming, and I'm happy for your success. And I'd suggest you might have done some of it yourself. You didn't need Elizabeth Warren's help. But let me just say this: premiums are going up. Deductibles are going up
because of Marco Rubio,
and people
because of Republicans.
People are stuck with plans they can't use
because of Marco Rubio and the Republicans.
So it would be unconscionable.
Although the plans they can use,
it's
illegal to offer those really crappy plans that they used to offer.
I know you're going to take a breath, so I'll get one more in.
All right,
the Republicans have to do what they're trying to do now, and
they have to satisfy their donors.
I don't think this is about the donors.
Then why is it about profit?
Well, profit is how things work here. I mean, Thom Hartmann is not in the Sisters of Mercy. I mean, I don't think who are the people here?
Who are
the people in this room who took an oath of poverty?
None of us in this room took an oath of office either. We're not in the government. I don't what I don't get, and I'll just
the profit motive does have its advantages, sir.
It has profound disadvantages when it has to do with things like life and death or the commons or things that are very, very complex. There's no way that you or I, Neil, can do the quote shopping around to figure out what should be. Oh, gee, I've got a pain in my chest. Let's see. I'm going to call 5 doctors and interrogate each one of them about what are the possibilities of that pain. This is nonsense. What we find is that the health care should be part of the commons. It should be a right and not a privilege. We're the only developed country in the world that says it's a privilege and not a right, and it's because of people espousing the ideology that you're promoting. And it seems to me cruel, and it also seems unnecessary. Why do we have to transfer $500 billion a year to health insurance companies?
You see, but people from my sort of side of the aisle, we look at Obamacare as just looting. Like liberals and their friends have looted the Treasury.
On behalf of whom?
Well, how about the $200 million they spent in Oregon, or the $120 million they spent for themselves and for the politicians and for all those Democratic PR firms who made the healthcare.gov commercials?
My charge is that the reason why Rubio is destroying healthcare and the reason why the Republicans are doing everything they're doing is because the health insurance companies are kicking back big campaign contributions to these Republican donors, and the Koch brothers are kicking out their whole libertarian ideology. You want their money? They're hundreds of millions of dollars.
You're saying it's not motivated by love and generosity and
I'm
care?
absolutely saying it's not. No.
Okay, that's wild.
And I hear you saying in response, the Democrats are doing the same thing.
They're looters, they're hacks.
Right. So the Democrats, by saying yes, you can have Medicaid, you can have Medicare, you can be covered even with pre-existing conditions. They're not getting kickbacks from the health insurance companies. So you're suggesting that poor people are bribing Democratic politicians? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, what I'm saying, Tom,
where are the Democratic politicians getting all these kickbacks?
How about all those Democratic-related PR firms, all the Democratic-related IT companies? How about, those are the people who made the hundreds of millions of dollars setting up these exchanges that don't work, up these call centers that nobody ever used. There was a lot of money spent on Obamacare that served no purpose other than to
hundreds of millions of dollars,
perhaps billions. Tom.
We're talking $508 billion a year that we are wasting because of administrative overhead and profit.
This crazy
system. So-called conservative.
This is a crazy system.
Why can't we
fix this system? Why do we have to be frozen
Because the
in
system is
2010?
stupid. Wait, we're not frozen in 2010. We're frozen in 1950. This is
frozen in
the system that was created
1947. If you want to talk
after
about
World War II.
the whole Kaiser thing, and
I know. I'm agreeing with you. The entire system
I would go back to pre-47.
So nobody has any health insurance.
People had health insurance.
You negotiate. Well, Ron Paul talked about how he used to negotiate for chickens in exchange for health care.
Yeah, a sack of potatoes like the old days. I get it. Well, I mean, why can't you buy?
Go down to the George Washington Hospital here. Tell them you need, you got cancer and you need some surgery, and bring a bunch of chickens with you. See how that works.
Growing up in the state of Massachusetts, I saw how jacked up car insurance was because of mandatory insurance and other things like that. And they took all the same liberals who jacked up car insurance in Massachusetts and now in other states, basically jacked up what was a bad healthcare system and just made it completely unworkable.
Car insurance should not be a right. It should be a privilege. Health insurance should be a right. Health care should be a right. Why do we even... Neil, tell me, why should we even have for-profit insurance companies? Why?
Because you can't have involuntary servitude.
No other democracy in the world allows for-profit.
So you go to medical school for 10 years and you have to work for free?
The doctors are not the ones. They don't own the health insurance companies.
So, well, who's going to work for free, Tom?
Nobody's going to work for free. Get the health insurance companies.
So where's the money?
So
where's the money come from?
It comes through a single-payer system through Medicare.
Just keep borrowing from China.
Put
everything's
everybody
fine.
on Medicare. Put everybody on Medicare. We will save $508 billion a year.
Well, what about like Canada, where they're actually imposing new rules?
They're saving $508 billion. They're the equivalent of it in Canada. They're looking at us going,
like there are more MRI machines in Boston than there are in the entire country of Canada.
Unnecessarily.
And it's like,
you're giving a great example of the profit motive driving market dislocations.
You're against MRIs?
I'm against too many of them, or stupid, yeah.
I'm for the American people, and especially the little people, Tom. Okay. Their problems are my problems. Their dreams are my...
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Breitbart.com. You can tweet him at Neil W. McCabe, MCCABE. Thank you, Neil.
Good to be with you, sir.
We'll be back. Thanks, Neil. Have a good one.
You're in.
We're back. Welcome back. Let's see here. Daniel in Dadeville, Alabama. Hey, Daniel, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hey, one thing, I'm a retired fire chief.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that they don't bring up is ambulance services. And I'll give you a prime example. My mother went to the doctor's office, which is right next door to a small hospital in a rural area. She tripped and fell, and they did not even send an ambulance. The guys just came over, picked her up on the cot, took her in, did the x-rays because she's 83 years old, and they wanted to make sure she didn't break anything. And she got an ambulance bill after her Medicare had paid. She got an ambulance bill for $600.
Whoa.
And they didn't even dispatch the ambulance. It's right there at the hospital. But it's a private, for-profit ambulance service.
Jeez.
And I went, you've got to be kidding me. I used to do it for free.
Yeah. As a member of the fire department. Fire departments aren't running ambulance services anymore?
Very few in the state of Alabama. Very few.
They've all been privatized.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
I can name, well, let's see, we have 109 fire departments, and I can only name 6 off the top of my head that are still run by fire departments. The rest are all privatized. All the major cities, Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile, Huntsville, even the smaller cities.
They're all privatized.
They're all for-profit ambulance services.
Amazing. See, this is the profit motive is a cancer. You know, Jesus pointed this out. It's like Karl Marx pointed this out. Although, you know, quoting Karl Marx is probably not the best thing to do. But it's, you know, the profit motive is in this case. There are times when the profit motive is entirely useful and productive. But in the case of healthcare, it is a cancer. Daniel, thanks for sharing that story with us. I appreciate the call. And thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Dan, watching Free Speech in Concord, California. Hey, Dan, what's on your mind today?
Great. Hope you're having a great day. I am.
Yeah, back at you. Yep.
And
yesterday in my Contra Costa Times here in Concord, California, they had an article in there that stated that the Affordable Care Act already has a section in it that allows insurance companies to sell insurance over state lines.
That's true. That's true. It's just that the insurance companies, each state has different standards established by their state insurance commissioners. And so the insurance companies are choosing to set up operations within each state and sell the plans specific to those states in those states. They don't even actually have to set up the operations. They just, their plans have to conform with the states. When the Republicans say sell across state lines, they're not talking about literally selling across state lines in the pure sense, because as you point out, Dan, that's already legal. What they're talking about really is doing away with the consumer protection of having a state insurance commissioner. This is an anti-states' rights argument that the Republicans are making.
Well, it's already been tried in 3 states, and it was a failure because the insurance companies don't want to do it because in each state, as in California, you have Northern California, Central California, and Southern California, and each area is different unto its own.
Yeah.
And so even the hospital providers, they don't want to deal with this because what would end up happening is the cost would be back onto the consumers.
Well, cost back on the consumers, that's the Republican mantra. Dan, thank you for the call. Fascinating. We'll be back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Jordan in Frankfort, Kentucky. Hey, Jordan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. Oh, hey, Jordan, Troy just told me we only have 30 seconds until the break. You want to hold on and I'll pick you up on the other side of the break for a...
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Okay, let me put you back on hold. My apologies. I thought I had a minute or two. A couple of other things that I had intended to talk about today. One of them is that the Republicans have passed another, this is, just made it easier for companies to exploit workers. The Trump administration just vacated, this is Dave Jamieson over at Huffington Post, just vacated an Obama executive order that would have punished federal contractors that ripped off or endanger their employees. So, it used to be that if you worked on a job site that was, a contractor who was being paid by the federal government, you knew that you had some protections in the workplace from being, that you knew that you'd actually get your pay, and if you didn't, you could sue, or you actually, wouldn't be hurt in the workplace, or you could sue. Now you no longer have that protection. Sorry, we love workers, don't we? Yes, right. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with your calls right after this. Stick around. Let me start out. The big question here, okay? The big question is, why is it that our poor neighborhoods remain poor? Whether it's in inner city Baltimore or whether it's in Appalachia, why is it that our poor neighborhoods remain poor? And I would argue that there is a cycle to this that has three major components. The first is that the schools suck in poor neighborhoods. There's no mystery or surprise to anybody. Schools tend not to do as well in poor neighborhoods. And part of that has been rationalized by people saying, well, you know, that's because poor people are going to those schools and their children start out life with, you know, a smaller vocabulary, and you know, those neighborhoods tend to be more polluted, and, you know, lead poisoning, God only knows. But anyhow, there's that argument. And I'm going to tell you why I think that those are all secondary arguments. The second is that policing tends to be different in poor communities and communities of color, and frankly worse. It's not as high quality as the policing in wealthy white neighborhoods, or even in you know, suburban upper middle class neighborhoods. And the third is that we you know, we're really starting to learn this clearly now, is that people of color literally have to stand in line twice as long as white people to vote every 2 years. Why is that? So here's the Trump riff that got me started thinking about this. Here he is. Here's Donald Trump.
I say it again. What do you have to lose? Look, what do you have to lose? You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose?
So, you know, first of all, Trump, to a large extent, is just perpetuating white stereotypes of black communities, you know. And in fact, it's quite insulting. And the what do you have to lose is really easily answered by simply going through all the things that the Republicans are trying to undo. They've successfully, in fact, gutted the Voting Rights Act, you know, the Civil Rights Act. They want to go after, you know, frankly, everything all the way back to Brown v. Board. So there's a lot to lose. But setting that aside, because that argument has been well made both on this program and in other places, what I think is going on here is that this is a piece of the new Jim Crow, to paraphrase Michelle Alexander, that has to do, and I think the conservatives have been doing this really slick for a long time. And I think it all has to do with, it's the money, stupid. People stand in line in poor communities twice as long to vote as they do in rich communities. Why? Because voting systems are paid for at the county level. So there's a smaller budget to run good voting operations. You have fewer voting machines, or you have fewer ballot places, or you have fewer locations, you have fewer poll workers, so the lines get longer. So, you know, because they depend on the local property tax and the local income tax in those communities that have it. So that's voting. Schools are paid, you know, I went off on a rant about this yesterday. Schools are paid by property taxes. Therefore, poor neighborhoods have bad schools. Good neighborhoods have great schools. It's real simple. It's got nothing to do with charter schools or school choice or any of that kind of BS. This is just flack that's being thrown into the wind by, in some cases, well-meaning liberals. More often, I'd say, conservatives who want to have private for-profit charter schools replace public education. But anyhow, the schools are funded locally. And then third, our police departments. Why do they have bad hiring standards? Why do they hire in communities of color in particular, why do you tend to get police officers who are the bottom of the barrel, basically? They're not necessarily the best paid. They're certainly not the best trained. You know, why? Well, because they're funded locally. So where did this come from? These three things are the quality of the future of the neighborhood, which is the schools, the quality of life of the present of the neighborhood, which is the police, and the ability of the neighborhood to have a say in its own governance, which is voting. How is it that all three of these things suck in poor communities? And by the way, in poor white communities as well as black communities, although it seems to be worse in some African-American communities. Why is it that they suck? Even in the face of efforts to change things, I would say it's because they're all funded locally. And conservatives have been promoting this idea of local control. And I would suggest to you that local control is a euphemism for local funding. The last thing people in white wealthy suburbs want to do is have their property tax dollars or their income tax dollars go to pay for schools in poor black neighborhoods. They don't want to pay for the police in the poor black neighborhoods, and they don't want to pay for the voting stations in poor black neighborhoods or just poor neighborhoods. And so these neighborhoods then find themselves locked into this cycle of poverty because they don't have the resources to pull themselves out. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This is fascinating. Adam Weinstein over at taskandpurpose.com wrote an article, How Much Healthcare Can You Buy for the Price of an iPhone? Jason Chaffetz said, hey, don't buy an iPhone, buy health insurance, right? You can get 5% of an appendectomy. These are all Florida prices. Apparently, Adam lives in Florida. In Florida, an average appendectomy costs $17,900. Let's see. You can pay for 2/3 of an allergy injection treatment, 1/5 of a breast biopsy, almost an entire IUD, 8% of one childbirth, about half of a colonoscopy. You can buy one whole CAT scan of your head for the cost of an iPhone. You can make 3 visits with a diabetes specialist. That's typically billed at $266 per hour. You can get 1 MRI of your knee. And if you have cancer, you can go 4 trips to your oncologist. That's assuming that you're not buying any drugs. 1 cancer-fighting radiation treatment almost. And 2.5 pregnancy ultrasounds. Right. Somehow, I don't like this picture. Jordan in Frankfort, Kentucky. Hey, Jordan, what's on your mind?
Yes, Thom, how you doing today?
Good. What's up?
Doing well. I would love if you could defend for me this notion of healthcare being a right, because it seems to me that is the premise that Obamacare and even the idea, many parts of Obamacare and even the idea of single payer is built upon, this premise that healthcare is a human right. And I would love to hear you break that down for me because I have a hard time buying that philosophy.
Well, there's a number of things in this country that we have defined as rights. One of them is the right to an education. It's not in the Constitution, but arguably in the Constitution, where it says that the whole point of the Constitution is to provide for the general welfare. Actually, the preamble says it very elegantly. It says, in order to form a more perfect union, in other words, to keep the country together, to establish justice, it's obvious, that's self-evident, to ensure domestic tranquility, so, to keep people from being too, whatever, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, we do ordain and establish this Constitution. And then in Article 1, Section 8, where it defines the ability of Congress to collect taxes and spend money, it says that there's a very specific reason for that. This is Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. And then it goes through and, to borrow money in the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations, to establish naturalization, to coin money, et cetera. So, the idea that everybody should have a free education, or at least up to the 12th grade, and it used to be up to the 8th grade until the 1930s, was an idea that came about in the 1880s in the United States, and it's passed constitutional muster a number of times because Congress decided that that was part of the general welfare of the United States. So if you take Franklin Roosevelt's words on their face, Jordan, and where he said, a necessitous man is not a free man. You're not free if you are sick and you cannot afford to pay for the treatment. Then I would suggest to you that, if another thing that we decided is a right, is to have a fire department protect your home. And so we all pay taxes to have fire departments protect our homes. It's part of the commons. We've agreed it's all part of the commons. So if we're going to agree that having your home protected from fire is a right. Aren't our bodies more important than our homes, Jordan?
Well, of course, our bodies are more important than our homes, and I appreciate the constitutional basis for those things, but I'm more looking for a philosophical basis, because it seems to me that if I make the statement that my health care is a right to me, what I'm really saying is that I have a right to your resources, or whoever's resources I need to get my health care in order to maintain my health care. I mean, wouldn't you agree that really by saying that's a right for me, it means I have the right to take from you?
Yes, absolutely, Jordan. This is how society works. We all get together and we say, you know, we really all want to have an interstate highway system. It would be a really good thing. And it's going to benefit all of us. It's going to benefit business. It's going to benefit individuals. And so we're going to pay for it. And somebody who doesn't have a car says, hey, I don't even have a car. Why should I be paying for an interstate highway system? Because ultimately you will benefit from that. People who don't have kids, they say, why am I paying property taxes to support education? Because the quality of life of the entire country is improved by it. If we don't have people carrying communicable diseases and walking around coughing with active tuberculosis in this country, and by the way, that's actually happening right now. 2 of the world hotspots for TB are New York and Los Angeles. If we don't have that, instead, if everybody in the country is covered with health insurance, you've got a national public health policy satisfied. It's the main reason why most countries want to make sure that everybody in their country has health insurance, or has health coverage, rather. We're actually the only country that does it with insurance. Well, we do, and Switzerland does, but Switzerland requires it be not-for-profit. It's the law. And so I would say that the interest of the general welfare of the United States, to make sure that we don't have rapidly moving, transmittable, communicable diseases, that people are going to stay sick and be coughing all over people because they can't afford the health insurance, to keep America safe and to keep America well, is, in my opinion, part of the commons. And when you define something as a right rather than a privilege, all you're saying is that government then has to figure out a way to deliver it. And so at that point, I'm just like with public education. Government says, okay, we've established that everybody has a right to an education. And all the rest of us have the obligation to pay into that because we are members of this society. And then government says, okay, you know, we have to deliver a good public education, so how do we most efficiently do that? And we've got this debate right now about, is it public schools, is it charter schools, is it public schools with magnet schools, is it choice? You know, there's a bunch of different options, and we're working through that process, but nobody is disputing the idea that everybody should have an education. We simply, in my opinion, Jordan, we need to go to that same place with regard to health care. And if we did, if we decided that health care was a right and therefore government had an obligation to make sure it was delivered to us, whether it's via, you know, we could do it via Obamacare and continue to spiff the health insurance industry to the tune of $500 billion a year, or we could do it through single payer. And we can take that $500 billion a year and, you know, cut your taxes, Jordan. I mean, it's just enormous things that we can do. Marty in Williamston, Michigan. Hey, Marty, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
One of your callers touched on this a bit earlier, but I'm really calling to encourage you to emphasize an aspect of this whole Obamacare issue that I virtually never hear mentioned in the media coverage. I just saw the MSNBC coverage of the ACA, or the repeal that's been introduced. They never mention this issue, but I would argue it's the real reason why Republicans have fought Obamacare and the ACA from the very beginning. And that is the ACA Affordable Care Act includes a 3.8% surtax on investment income for high-income people and a 2.3% excise tax on corporations that manufacture certain medical devices that profit from the insurance coverage.
You're absolutely right. The richest people in America are going to get an average per person $7 million tax cut. You know, the wealthiest 400 families in this country, well, and probably thousands more, are going to get a multi-million-dollar tax cut if the Republicans repeal Obamacare. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a large part of the motivation. I think that that's, you know, why billionaires have been funding anti-healthcare ads, whether it's creepy Uncle Sam or others. And you know, what a surprise! Rich people don't want to pay a tax.
And that element is just never mentioned on the mainstream press. I watch all kinds of news, and they never talk about that dimension of all of this.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing that most of the people you're seeing on the news are in those income brackets where they don't want to be paying that tax. Marty, thanks for the call. Matt in Union, Kentucky. Hey, Matt, what's on your mind today?
Well, I have Medicaid, and I have multiple sclerosis. I live in Kentucky. Matt Bevin is my governor, and it was a disaster to me when he was elected. And then, for Trump, even if Hillary was elected, it would probably, well, at least we would have had the Affordable Care Act. But with everyone's complaining about the Affordable Care Act, but no one's complaining about the military spending, the $54 billion.
Right.
In addition to military spending, and when the government's supposed to be working for us, and it seems like they're trying to work for their own, or maybe for the military-industrial complex, or whatever their own agendas are. I am very scared of losing Medicaid at the moment. I have multiple sclerosis. I have asthma. I have allergies, really bad allergies, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm worried. And I do feel like that, but I do feel like that insurance should be a right to everybody, just like it is in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And not just, I mean, you can make a moral argument for this, but you can also make a financial argument. You can make a public health argument. You can make a quality of governance, a quality of life argument. I mean, there's multiple ways to build a case for our not once again being thrown back on the tender mercies of the banksters who call themselves for-profit health insurance companies. It is just so wrong what they're doing, what they're up to. Matt, thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it. And it's just this is an issue that touches everybody's lives, and we know that the Republicans, that they want to privatize Medicare, voucherize Medicare, they want to privatize Social Security, they want to cut Medicaid, but now with the Affordable Care Act, this whole thing, they're going after all of us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking your calls on healthcare. Now you got Tom Price saying, "Oh, no significant change." Right. So they're just going to tweak it and rename it. What's going on? And welcome back. John, watching Free Speech TV in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the caller who, said that, he didn't necessarily agree that it's a right. It actually is a right. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I can read it to you. It's not very long. It says, everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for their health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, and other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. And so...
and we ratified that.
So, yeah, this was promulgated by the United States government. It was Eleanor Roosevelt, I think, was the ambassador to the United Nations, or she was very much in support of this. And we are a signatory onto this document. So, yes, we are, it's how many years, and we're still not, really.
That's because it's the UN, John.
Yes, it is. It's the United Nations that we are part of. We're part of a community of nations, international. This is part of, what we are also a part of. And this is the standard by which we should be measured by, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I don't disagree, John. It's just, you're never going to get the Republican Party to agree to anything that the United Nations says. But I think that we should just... the one way to do this, and I mean, if I was a Republican, this would be the way that I would be proposing, because they're so fear-based, is to say, the most effective protection we would have against a bioterrorism attack, against somebody from ISIS making it through and releasing, an infectious agent in one of our cities. The most effective defense we could have against that would be a national health care system where everybody...
We claim to be a moral people. How about just the fact that it's just pretty damn nasty to let people die?
Yeah, well, totally down with that too.
If we
I'm trying to
claim
craft.
that we're a Christian country and a country of morals and ethics, let's get with the rest of the world and become ethical. I mean, I'm calling out my fellow Americans, for using your show to say, I'm sorry, this is just unconscionable behavior.
Yes.
You are essentially telling people die and decrease the excess population. That's what you're telling your fellow American.
That's sure what it sounds like. And John, thank you for the call. Well said. Chris, Chris, hang on. I'm going to put you back on hold. We just have 45 seconds to the break. But this is what John is saying is absolutely spot on, and it's just this word access. This is the thing you really want to pay attention to whenever you hear Republicans talking, whether it's Tom Price or Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell or Jason Chaffetz. Jason Chaffetz saying, "Oh well, don't buy that iPhone." They all say we want everybody to have access to health care. We all have access to health care. Ronald Reagan signed this into law, and I believe it was 1986, that an emergency room cannot turn you away. They also, can't turn you away if you can't afford to pay. So everybody theoretically has access to health care in the United States. That was the Republican claim when they passed that law. So we all have access. Let's stop that argument. And let's talk about how are we going to deliver that health care? How do we actually get it? Because, we all have access to the Mercedes dealership, but we can't afford a Mercedes. How do you get it? We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I think that we have Patrick Gavin from Talk Media News on the phone, but I can't put him on the board here. Oh, he hasn't called in yet. Oh, that would account for why. Okay, in that case, let's take some calls from listeners. Chris in Petaluma, California. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thrilled to be talking to you. Big fan.
Thank you.
I have my own personal Affordable Care Act story. I hurt myself at work in 2003. And in 2005, I lost my insurance and eventually got it back through the Affordable Care Act. And right now, if I lose my insurance, I will be crippled because the medication that I take is far beyond my reach. With even probably if I could afford insurance, any normal insurance company would not pay for it.
Right.
But through my excellent care in my community health center, I've talked to a lot of the people that work there, and I think there's a big point that people are missing. How many jobs will be lost if this goes through? And all the access that all these millions and millions of people have, there are people with good paying jobs that are providing the care that those jobs didn't exist before. How much is this going to affect our economy as well?
Well, I think if it frees up if it frees up $508 billion in spending every year, I think that will have a very positive effect. And that's one of the reasons why all these other countries have single-payer health insurance. Chris, I gotta move along, but thank you for the call. Patrick Gavin is on the line with us with Talk Media News. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com. Patrick, what's going on in the world today? Hey,
I'm going to tag along with the conversation we were just having with one of your listeners about some of the reaction here in D.C. to the Republican Party's quote-unquote Obamacare repeal, which is sort of a funny term because, as you probably know, it's really not a repeal at all. It essentially leaves the basic architecture of Obamacare intact. But I think what's sort of interesting is exactly two things. One, exactly what are they trying to achieve? And two, are they going to be able to achieve it? This is not going to be a walk in the park. And I'm just talking just for Republicans. Some conservatives, including Senator Rand Paul, are already coming out strongly against this. Republicans are obviously going to get zero Democratic votes, I imagine. So they really cannot afford any defections. And then the other, real question, which I don't think anyone has a great sense on, is just how much the president's going to weigh in or lean in, if at all. I think part of the problem is that this keeps a lot of the part of the problem for Republicans trying to get Republican support is that it does keep a lot of the most popular elements of Obamacare, for instance, the no discrimination by insurance companies against pre-existing conditions and keeping kids up to 26-year-olds.
But even with the pre-existing conditions, they're talking about doing away with lifetime, bringing back lifetime caps. So you'll have a situation like my wife had, where, if a couple of months short of the end of her breast cancer treatment, which was a very expensive treatment, it was an experimental drug at the time, or a new drug, brand new drug, and it worked, great, thank God. She got a letter from the health insurance company saying, you're within $100,000 of your lifetime limit, and when you hit it, we're going to drop you. And nobody's going to pick her up after that. That was 4 months before Obamacare came into effect.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that for me, the one thing when I look at this, and I don't know if you feel the same way, is, is just trying to get a sense of what exactly is it trying to achieve. In other words, are Americans clamoring for a bill, that allows the richest taxes to be lowered and higher premiums for elderly and reduce subsidies for the poor? It just seems very
I don't think so.
On exactly what their audience is. And yeah, they've been talking about this for 6 years, 7 years. They feel as if they have to do something. And on top of that, by my count, they have about 60 days until the August recess, which is when they say they will have this done. So, you add all these things up together, it raises a lot of questions about, even if you're inclined to support this type of legislation, just what exactly they're trying to accomplish, and also, what are their odds of actually
Well, what they're trying to accomplish, in my opinion, what they're trying to accomplish is do away with the $7 million a year tax on billionaires, right? The 400 wealthiest families in America will each get a $7 million tax cut with this Republican proposal. Do away with that real high-end funding for Obamacare that is subsidizing the low-end funding. And therefore, if you do away with that, if you give that tax break to the Koch brothers, then you cannot, for every billionaire who gets a tax break, there's a couple of thousand people who no longer get any kind of assistance. And so you've got to, dial that back. You got to block grant Medicaid to the states because there's not as much money anymore. But they've got, at all costs, they've got to keep intact this $500 billion a year subsidy to the health insurance companies in the United States, and which no other developed country in the world pays, and $500 billion every year. It's mind-boggling. Anyhow, Patrick, what else is going on in the world?
Well, the last thing I was to kind of bring up is sort of another fallout from the Trump/Russia/wiretapping story, which is, I think one thing that at least folks here in Washington are keeping their eyes on is whether or not FBI Director James Comey is going to sort of do what he's done in the past, which is actually come out and say something. We've gotten conditioned to him sort of being, I guess you could say, camera-friendly over the election with regards to Hillary Clinton's emails. And yet on this topic, at least in an on-the-record context, we have not heard anything from the director about the claims by the president that the former president was involved in wiretapping. And, I do think there's going to be an increasing amount of pressure for him to do that. It's obviously natural for the FBI director not to do that and to not comment on these things. But given the fact that he's a track record.
And on top of that, you've got Professor Lawrence Tribe now saying that for a sitting president to charge a former president with a felony knowingly incorrectly, is itself an impeachable offense, that is a high crime or misdemeanor. And that's going to be an interesting. Obviously, the Democrats don't control the House or the Senate, so it's unlikely to happen unless Trump really, really starts to, anger some of his Republican colleagues. What do you think?
Well, no, I think you're right. I think the odds of any type of impeachment are low to say the least.
Although the British betting odds are 55% right now. Impeachment within a year.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there were betting odds on those things.
Oh, it's a minor industry in Europe right now, and you can no longer make money betting that Trump is going to is going to leave office. 55%. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I think what people are going to look forward to Comey is that, at least Democrats, is if there is some sort of smoking gun between Trump and the Kremlin, again, if that even exists, you've got to come out and say something.
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be an investigation, if nothing else, just to clear the air. Patrick Gavin, thank you.
Thanks,
Talk Media News.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Today we're reading from my book, Rebooting the American Dream. This is Chapter 1, Bring My Job Home. And we're about halfway into the chapter here. It starts out with this section called The High Cost of Free Trade. During the 1930s, none of the Asian powerhouse economies had adopted American industrialization strategies. So when Franklin Roosevelt put money into workers' pockets and they bought toys or clothes or radios, all those items were made in Alabama or Connecticut or Michigan. Now they're made in China, which experienced a labor shortage in 2009, causing its average wage to increase from 80 cents an hour to $1.14 an hour, and its economy to grow by more than 8%. China has been following the lead of Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea during the past half-century and has become an industrial powerhouse as a result. And ironically, each of these countries got its strategy from us. George Washington's Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, proposed it in 1791. And by 1793, most of the parts of his report on the subject of manufactures had been instituted as a series of legislative and policy steps. And it didn't start with Hamilton. He was just building on King Henry VII's Tudor Plan of 1485, which turned England from a backwater state with raw wool as its chief export into a major developed state that was producing fine clothing and other textile products from wool. He accomplished this by severely restricting the export of wool from England with high export tariffs and restricting the import of finished woolen goods with high import tariffs. King Henry learned this from the Dutch. They copied the Romans, and the Romans got it from the Greeks 3,000 years ago. Nonetheless, President Obama continues to follow his predecessors, Bush Jr., Clinton, Bush Sr., and Reagan, all in the religious belief that free trade will save us all. It's all nonsense. Free trade is a guaranteed ticket to the poorhouse for any nation, and the evidence is overwhelming. Even the phrase free trade was introduced by King Henry VII back in the 1400s as something that England should encourage other countries to do while it maintained protectionism. A more contemporary example of the application of that wisdom can be seen in South Korea. In the 1960s, South Korea was an undeveloped nation whose major exports were human hair for wigs and fish, and whose average annual income was around $400 per working family. Today, it's a major industrial power with an average annual per capita income of more than $32,000, and it beats the United States in its rate of college attendance, exports, and lifespan. Korea did this by closing its economy and promoting its export industries. A decade earlier, Japan had done the same thing. 40 years earlier, Germany had done it. In July of 2009, with no evident irony or understanding of how South Korea went about becoming a modern economic powerhouse, President Obama lectured the countries of Africa during his visit to Ghana. As the New York Times reported, quote, Mr. Obama said that when his father came to the United States, his home country of Kenya had an economy about as large as that of South Korea per capita. Today, he noted, Kenya remains impoverished and politically unstable, while South Korea has become an economic powerhouse, end quote. In that day's newspaper, or the next day's newspaper, the lead editorial titled Tangled Trade Talks repeated the essence of the mantra of its confused op-ed writer, Thomas L. Friedman, that so-called free trade is the solution to a nation's economic ills. But South Korea did not ride the free trade train to success. South Korean economist Ha Joon-ching details South Korea's economic ascent in his 2007 book, Bad Samaritans, The Myth of Free Trade and the Secret History of Capitalism. In 1961, South Korea was, as the president said, as poor as Kenya, with an $82 per capita annual income and many obstacles to economic growth. South Korea's main exports were primary commodities, such as tungsten, fish, and human hair for wigs. And that's how the Korean technology giant Samsung started, by exporting fish, fruits, and vegetables. Today, it's the world's largest conglomerate by revenue, $173 billion. By throwing out free trade and embracing protectionism during the 1960s, South Korea managed to do in 50 years what it took the United States 100 and Britain 150 years to do. After a military coup in 61, General Park Chung-hee implemented short-term plans for South Korea's economic development. He instituted the Heavy and Chemical Industrialization Program, and South Korea's first steel mill and modern shipyard went into production. South Korea also began producing its own cars and used import tariffs to discourage imports. Electronics, machinery, and chemical plants soon followed, all sponsored or subsidized and tariff protected by the government. Between 1972 and 1979, the per capita income grew more than 5 times. In addition, new protectionist slogans were adopted by South Korean citizens. For example, it was viewed as a civic duty to report anyone caught smoking foreign cigarettes. All the money made from exports went into developing industry. South Korea enacted import bans, high tariffs, and excise taxes on thousands of products. South Korea's transformation was, to quote Chang, as if Haiti had turned into Switzerland. This transformation was accomplished through protecting fledgling industries with high tariffs and subsidies, and only by gradually opening itself to global competition. In addition, the government ran or heavily funded many of the larger industries, at least until they were globally competitive. The government ran or regulated the banks and therefore the credit. It controlled foreign exchange and used its currency reserves to import machinery and industrial products. Now, I'm not suggesting that latter part for the United States, but the fact of the matter is that protecting your economy works. And we're basically the only developed country in the world that doesn't do it any longer. Rebooting the American Dream is the book.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Birthday? And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and super happy to have in the studio with me Kathleen Rogers. She's the president of the Earth Day Network, earthday.org, and marchforscience.com also. Another one of your websites, do I have that right?
Yeah, well, we're March for Science /Earth Day. There are 2 websites because we have 2 groups.
Oh, okay, great. Well, tell me about Earth Day Network.
We are the organization that came out of the first Earth Day, which was founded by Gaylord Nelson, Senator Gaylord Nelson, and Dennis Hayes. Dennis is still actively involved in Earth Day. He's our emeritus chair, runs a foundation, really nice boss. And we have, over the course of the last close to 50 years, we're coming up to our 50th anniversary, expanded way beyond the United States, and we're now in 192 countries with about 1 billion people participating in Earth Day worldwide.
Which specific day is Earth Day and why that day?
Can't believe you have to ask me that question. Earth
sorry.
Day is April 22nd. They just kept it like some other major holidays the same day every year, like Christmas is on the 25th, right. Earth Day is on the 22nd. Right. So regardless of the day of the week, this year it's a Saturday, which makes it fun for everybody.
Good.
So it's April 22nd.
Why? Any idea why that day was picked?
I think, and it's really interesting because when I was hired, the organization had been around for a while, and I began my job tragically right after September 11th, so I had a lot of time to sit around and think about and find out and research about Earth Day. And so I believe the reason they chose it, best historical reference, is because it was in the middle of the week. It was focused originally, before it became Earth Day, it was called an environmental teach-in. So the focus was on college campuses. It was the era of a lot of activity on college campuses, the sort of combination of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, the environmental.
I remember it well.
Yeah. So it's they picked that day of the week to do it as a teach-in. And what's extraordinary about it is, given it was a work day, 20 million people came out on the streets through the efforts. Dennis talks about how they mimeographed everything and sent it by those telephone faxes and that kind of thing. And that was about 10% of our population at the time. And I think it woke a ton of people, particularly politicians, up to the fact that pollution was something that people really cared about. And so as the result of the first Earth Day, President Nixon created EPA, of all things, and many of our, sort of stalwart and critically important environmental laws, which many of which have been exported around the world, were passed sort of in quick succession after the first Earth Day. So that was.
But things have changed somewhat. I mean, I remember the late 60s, early 70s, you could fly into any major city, LA was the most conspicuous, and see this giant dome of yellow-gray haze over it. The Cuyahoga River caught on fire in, I think, 68 or 69.
Right. Santa Barbara oil spill.
Yeah, there was just some really horrible stuff. And it was also just a few years after Rachel Carson had published Silent Spring, and we were all getting it, that DDT everywhere was killing off the birds. And there was just a broad consensus that this is no way to live. That seems to be happening in China right now. I mean, they're solarizing faster than any country in the world. But is there still that strength of conviction here in the United States? It almost seems like, people on the left, or just average Americans, I think everybody except the right-wing wackadoodles, have grown complacent. That, we've just taken this assumption, basically, that, the air is clean and the water's...
You can't see it.
So
it isn't bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, every movement has a honeymoon period where things move and move and move, and then people sort of expect, because they go about their daily lives without being as focused, say, for example, as I am on the particulars of environmental protection, they expect to go through their lives and have other people take care of it. And it's true for me for other issues that I care about, but I don't spend my days worrying about. And so I think we went through a honeymoon period. I think industry, and I've worked on both sides of it. I've worked in law firms, supporting compliance by big companies. And so I understand both sides of the issue. And I think what you have is you go through periods where everybody agrees that we have to clean up major pieces of the environment. And then when it starts becoming sort of smaller and smaller, even though if those issues are deadly to human health and the environment generally, and the costs increase, there's this automatic tension that corporations, the good ones, have with the environmental community, the broader environmental community. And so in order to build that movement constantly, and Earth Day Network is focused sort of at the bottom of the pyramid. It's not the coolest work in the world, but what we do is bring people into the movement and hope we can educate them and activate them and get them engaged in higher and higher levels of civic participation. Around the world, it's critically important. And so industry got smart, and they began to fight back in a very organized way, often meant much more, with a lot more money.
We lost the Superfund, for example.
Yeah, we've lost, a number of battles. There are many people in industry that are just extraordinary people. Paul Pullman from Unilever. I mean, HP does a great job. There are lots of companies that do extraordinary work, but then there are other companies whose livelihood depends on polluting the earth. And so it's not in their best interest economically to not fight those battles.
Might we now be at a moment? I mean, here we had yesterday, I believe it was, maybe today, the White House sent out a press release that plagiarized an entire paragraph from an ExxonMobil press release.
I saw that.
We've got Scott Pruitt running the EPA, the guy who has sued the EPA 14 times and whose emails are coming out now. We're discovering that he's been colluding with Devon Energy and Koch Industries and other major polluters. And now he's in charge of environmental protection. Is this the natural process of the disintegration of the consensus, or is this a tipping point, an informing point? Is this so egregious that Americans are going to rise up, or are we not yet there?
I think it's really a combination of things. And I think in every movement building, I mean, the progressive movement is based on the word progress, right? And it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And there's a certain, tension and sort of rubber band effect where you're moving along. It's perceived of costing more money at the time to implement. I mean, a great example of this is the auto industry, which many moons ago, decades ago, spent the 2017 equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars trying to fight seatbelts.
I remember.
And now that's all they do is sell safety. And that's a good thing. But when it appeared to be sort of against their financial interests, they mounted these giant battles. And so as we move slowly but surely, away from fossil fuels, there are people in the industry that, live their lives for the status quo, make a lot of money, and don't intend to give up without a good fight. I think you're seeing that right now. It's the public is somewhat inured to environmental issues. I mean, look what happened at Flint, the Deepwater Horizon. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. People get excited, then they fall back, and they, again, go back their daily lives. So I think what we're seeing is just a pullback, but the green movement's inexorable. It's moving forward.
Well, I hope so. I certainly hope so, because there have been a few setbacks. Is there any, I mean, typically in movement building or anything else, it's good to have a narrative and it's good to have an example. And, the Cuyahoga River catching on fire was a big deal back in the day. Is Flint, I mean, and we know now there are 3,000 communities in the United States that have water supplies that are as bad or worse than Flint. And it's getting virtually no publicity. Nobody's contesting the fact. But is there something, other than poisoned water, lead in our water, or is that the thing? I mean, is there going to be a focus for Earth Day this year?
Well, interestingly, and part of the reason we teamed up with the March for Science people was because our global theme for 2017, which will last through our 50th, is global climate and environmental literacy. It's a focus on science. So we're running campaigns in 192 countries to encourage governments and school boards to teach their kids what they need to know about the 21st century, how to get jobs, what's the green movement about, prepare them for investment. Because the people who aren't trained and educated in environment and science are not going to get the kind of investment they need to pull themselves out of deep poverty or continue to be leading the economic world. So we're pushing this agenda globally, not because we want to control what people think or prove ourselves, but because it's really good for business. And so many countries are coming to us and saying, how do we prepare our country for green investment? Because they want that investment in their country. They don't want to be making little umbrellas for drinks. They want to be making systems. They want to be making solar panels. They want to be educating their people so that they have jobs. So whoever, wins the green revolution race is going to be the next king of the economy. If it turns out to not be the U.S., I'll be really disappointed because we got the brains and education. China's doing a bang-up job. Never would have said so. Right. Lots of countries are pulling ahead in various things. Now, of course, China has enormous pollution problems. India does. I have 3 offices in India, and when I was there the last time, I mean, the ground level pollution was bright orange, and in some places I couldn't see my feet. It was brutal. So, but yet we have tremendous problems in our country. It's not as if the people at EPA, and particularly the enforcement and compliance divisions, aren't incredibly good people, but rather than cut their funding, they should be increasing their funding because in the end, this saves lives. It saves children's lives. I mean, pushing back rules on putting mercury and arsenic and cadmium and chromium in our water is a really bad deal, not just for poor people who don't have a voice, but for all of us. When I'm eating tuna fish sandwiches, I'm consuming mercury.
Well, and there's not just also the personal self-interest. One of the things that we know about lead in drinking water, for example, is that it depresses IQ and increases violent behavior.
Exactly.
Throughout the lifetime of the person. So, every community that we're inflicting with lead-contaminated water, we're also producing a generation of damaged people, and many of them damaged in ways that cause them to end up criminal.
In the case of Flint, 41% of the people that live there are below the poverty line. It's not as if they didn't have ample warning. They switched, the township was in, or the city was in receivership. They flipped the water from, the Great Lakes to the Flint River, and, sort of the rest is history. And I think, when you don't have a voice and you don't have the economic well-being to fight the right fight, it took people, particularly moms and a few pediatricians and other people in Virginia Tech, months and months and months to convince both local authorities and EPA that that there was a real problem in Flint. And that problem is repeated not just with lead, but with other issues around the world thousands of times a day. I mean, we all suffer from it, whether it's tree cutting or lead or mercury in our water, and rollbacks aren't going to help.
Right. Kathleen, we're going to hit a hard break here in a minute or so. Can you quickly tell us about the March for Science, marchforscience.com? We have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so Earth Day Network is partnering with some terrific young scientists who came up with the idea. It's being organized worldwide. We're combining marches with teach-ins around the world, which is really fun. And so we'll have a large event on the National Mall that I hope will be well attended. Having been through many Earth Days on the Mall, I know that it could be 40 degrees and raining buckets, so I'm knocking on wood that the weather's good, because it'll be great to have a whole new constituency come to the fore to talk about what's important. They're there not just because of environmental issues by a long shot. They're there because they really care about the integrity of facts and science. And it is, after all, chemistry and physics and all these things sort of the basis for all humanity. And so they know how to get it right, and we should listen to them. And so I think they'll be there to tell us a lot of stories, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Any word on how many scientists are being laid off here in D.C.?
Well, I think you have to look at budget. Submitting a budget doesn't mean that's going to be the budget. I've been around a long time, so I don't get hysterical over every single thing I see coming out of whatever. Right. You tend to have, be a little bit better about it. There are lots of Republicans and Democrats that aren't going to allow some of these budget cuts to move forward. They just won't. They have constituents who are suffering from environmental issues, and they're not. I don't think they're going to let them down, regardless of their party affiliation. Some will, and I think we'll see some dramatic budget cuts. But we'll see what happens. I mean, we have to be relentlessly focused on the things that really matter, particularly human health and the environment and climate change. We have to be. We also don't want to let the rest of the world down, which is moving forward, thanks to us, to develop, a green economy and take care of their own pollution. But I hate to think we'd send the wrong signals to the rest of the world as we go about regrouping or whatever's happening to us right now.
So the March for Science is happening on the 22nd of April also?
Earth Day. Yes, on Earth Day. And it'll be on the National Mall and the Monument grounds. We'll be building a stage, and then there'll be a march down Constitution. Congress is out, but I'm sure the local marches around the country and actually around the world will get a lot of press, which we'll be grateful for.
Kathleen Rogers, the president of the Earth Day Network, earthday.org, and marchforscience.com. Thank you, Kathleen.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Bob, watching Free Speech TV in Waynesville, North Carolina. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Just listening to your conversation ties right in. The people that complain the most about how much taxes they're paying for this health pool are the very ones that are making us sick. And now with the legislation that's allowing them to freely dump their garbage into our water, into our air, sure, they should be paying more. They should be paying the largest part of our health pool because they're the ones that are creating our sickness and even terminal sicknesses. That, of course, you can't put a price on that. But, yes, they should be paying tremendous amounts in that pool because they are the ones that are creating our illnesses.
Yeah, it's and you look at like the Superfund. The Superfund used to be all the companies that make poisons that could end up being in a Superfund site all had to kick in a few pennies for out of every, $1 million or whatever that they made, to pay for the potential cleanup if they decide to go bankrupt. And they finally, after, a couple of decades, the Republicans finally got it through that no more funding from industry. Sorry, it's going to be entirely paid for by the federal government. And then they started cutting back the funding from the federal government. So now, we've got Superfund sites that are not even being attended to. It's just a mess. Bob, thanks for the call. Sarah in Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, Sarah, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk. Not many people have talked about these high deductibles, which is what we have. Last year, I had to have a colonoscopy, and our deductible is like $5,000. They pay for nothing until you hit your $5,000. Right. And we hit it. And anyway, my family has a history of colon cancer. And she said, I want you to have one every 6 months. And so we hit it. And so my doctor, we said, okay, you need to get this in November, which was great because then the insurance would pay for the whole thing, which is $2,500 to $3,000. And they denied it. And we repealed it. And it finally went through, but for this year. And we flew through all of our savings last year, $5,000. We can't afford it, so I can't go get one because the $5,000 started over again. But if they had approved it when they were supposed to, when the doctor recommended it back in November, it would have been covered. So I think this is another little racket that they're playing.
Yeah. Yeah, these for-profit corporations are going to do absolutely any and everything they can to just, stick it to us. I mean, to
absolutely
to exploit the American people for all their profits. So you must be on the bronze plan out of Obamacare. Is that?
No, this is through my husband's work.
Employer-provided health insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's amazing. Those high deductible plans. I mean, $5,000 is a substantial deductible. That's
and they pay nothing. I mean,
right.
Until you,
right. It costs the employers a lot less, but.
Mm-hmm.
I said it costs the employers a lot less, but I look at those plans, and as an employer myself, I wouldn't inflict something like that on my employees any more than I'd want it for myself. That just seems wrong. And
yeah, well, it's I don't know exactly how they came up with it or what.
I think that's the maximum deductible that is allowed under Obamacare, under the new law, under the Affordable Care Act. And so they're simply going with the maximum. But I could be wrong on that, Sarah. Please don't quote me. The expert on that stuff was on yesterday. That would be Alex. Sarah, thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with us. Thank you for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions. But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here
on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Catherine in Burlington, Vermont. Got a minute to the break. You got a quick one, Catherine?
Yes. I just wanted to give an example of a healthcare situation that was really wonderful for many centuries. In ancient China, doctors didn't get paid if they failed to cure the patient, and a lantern, if the patient died on their watch, a lantern was hung out in front of their house. So lanterns, if they collected, people would stop going to that particular doctor. There were a lot of lanterns outside of his house.
Yeah, I've heard that story before. I don't know if it's apocryphal or if it's true, but it does sound kind of utopian. Or maybe that's not quite the right word, but for a pre-industrial society, a kind of cool way to do things. Catherine, thank you for the call, and we'll be back with more of your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with your calls, your thoughts on health care. Do you think the Republicans are actually going to get away with this? I'm getting skeptical. Carrie in Seattle, listening on KBCS. Hey, Carrie, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
I was wondering, I've been listening to you for about a year and love your program so much and have been inspired to become more active in my local politics.
Cool.
And, thanks, because it's really, I was hoping it would be more rewarding, but I I went to my first city council meeting on Monday for a really big resolution that the city council of Seattle is looking at to build a new police precinct in the North End. That's going to cost the city $149 million.
Whoa.
Yeah. And needless to say, there was a lot of movement against it from the community. There was about 150 to 200 of us there against the city doing that. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. You know, Seattle has, in the past 5 to 10 years, has had a homeless explosion. We have, the last count was like about 4,000 people living on the streets, a lot of them families with children, and we just think it's a misuse of funds. We went there, and people spoke for over an hour telling the personal stories. Actual people who were homeless came and spoke, you know, really moving things that brought me to tears personally as a human being, listening to these stories of real life and how policies have affected these people. And we didn't get out of a council of 8 people, only one of the council members changed their position. Only one.
Was that Shama Sawant?
Pardon me?
Was that Shama Sawant?
She was gone. So they really conveniently had the vote when she was gone in India. Mike O'Brien was the only one. He went into the meeting saying he was going to, you know, support the resolution to build a precinct. And then he by the end, he actually heard us and was like, you know, I think we should put a hold on this for about 4 weeks so the community can ask more questions. We can engage the community, find out what their concerns are. It seems like there's a lot of real legitimate
Were you
concerns.
arguing, Carrie, that money, there's nothing wrong with appropriating the money, but let's use it for homeless people instead of police? Or were you arguing that the police are not necessary there? I mean, I'm not sure I understand exactly what the argument was.
The argument was that is way too much money to spend on a police station when the money could be appropriated to more social services that are needed, as well as I think a lot of people's thoughts were that putting money into policing, furthering policing, the building that they're trying to build is going to be way bigger, way more expensive than any police station in the country to hold a lot of militaristic weapons. They're going to do a lot of training for the whole region in there. And, you know, the community doesn't want that. We don't want our police more militarized. We don't want more police. We want more social services because poverty, the crime happens because of poverty. And if we can actually alleviate poverty, that will help, you know, presumably.
Yeah, no, I get the logic. Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So, and it was just, so I guess my question to you is, if someone wants to become involved, I mean, I was so disappointed when I left that out of 8 people, only one of them really was even affected by an hour and a half of people. And like hundreds of people were there. I mean, it got really rowdy. It was actually pretty intense meeting. Yeah. And it was like our voices were we were still silenced.
What I would say, Carrie, is persist. In November of 1873, Susan B. Anthony went to a polling place where it was illegal for women to vote and voted. And in December, she was arrested. And in March or April of the following year, she was convicted of the crime of voting while female. She devoted her life to women's suffrage, to the right of women to vote. And she died before it ever happened. But that didn't stop her from continually coming back and coming back and coming back and fighting for what she knew was right and fighting for what she knew was right. Sometimes these things take time. It takes time to build a critical mass. It takes time to get the word out. You don't win every battle. In fact, you typically lose most of them or compromise most of them. But don't give up. Please? Okay. Please? Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't want to give up at all, but I appreciate you taking my call and giving me those words of encouragement because I needed it. I needed it after that.
No struggle happens just because a bunch of people show up and say, hey, you know, we're here and we think this way, and all the politicians just go, oh, okay. It takes more than that, and I mean it's an important thing, and it's a vital start. And I'm assuming that there was some good community organizing that got those people to that city council meeting, that got you to that city council meeting, and that you played a role in that. So take that group, take that community organizing that's been done, and start expanding it, start growing it, start looking for people to replace the members of the city council who are not voting the way that you want. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. John Spicer apparently saying that Donald Trump has not actually checked with the FBI about whether Barack Obama wiretapped him, which leads you to wonder, why the hell is he tweeting about this? I mean, there's something just like fundamentally wrong here. Donald Trump, meanwhile, is taking credit for an ExxonMobil investment in, pumping more carbon out of the ground here in the United States. Turns out ExxonMobil actually announced this, actually started the process in 2012 during the Obama administration, but Trump is still taking credit for it, even copied and pasted a paragraph out of ExxonMobil's press release. He's taken credit for announcements about new jobs at Fiat Chrysler, at Ford. This is from an article over at thinkprogress.org by, let's see here, who wrote this thing? It does, Bryce Covert. And he's taking credit for jobs at Fiat Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, Intel, Lockheed Martin, Sprint, and Walmart. Yet none of those can be directly attributed to his administration. And instead, they were all mostly in the works before his election. We have the exact opposite of the Obama administration. During the Obama administration, when he would have a success, I would be saying, go on television, tell people about it, let's promote it. And, of course, it didn't happen. And now Trump is like claiming credit for things that he really shouldn't even be taking credit for. It's bizarre. Well, it's a study in contrast, I guess, if nothing else. Rich in Cedro Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, as liberals, Democrats, progressives are wont to do, I think we get way too wonky when we start talking about single payer. And the biggest sin, I think, is referring to it as health insurance or health care. It should be referred to as insurance, because that's the kitchen table stuff. That's the piece of paper in your hand. That's the bill people are looking at. It's the insurance. Mm-hmm. And also, I think also we need to put more emphasis on the economic mobility a single-payer system would have. And finally, while this topic is at the fore, somebody's got to put out like a Ronco-style ad that dummies it all down and inundate the airwaves with, hey, you need single-payer.
Yeah, there you go. Unfortunately, it benefits all of us, but it doesn't benefit any corporation or billionaire who would make that investment. And that's the sad thing about good public policy, is that good public policy doesn't get promoted anymore, because ever since that 76 Supreme Court decision, the Buckley versus Vallejo decision, it is possible, legal for billionaires and corporations to own their own politicians, and they have done it. They bought the entire Republican Party and a good chunk of the Democratic Party, and this is not a good thing for the United States. We need to be having conversations about public policy that are actually discussions about public policy. Rich, thanks for the call. Well said. Bruce in Waltham, Mass. Hey, Bruce, what's up?
Hey, Thom Hartmann, thanks. On that point that you made about, how people contribute for our roads and our schools, it should be the same way for the medical, offering of this health care plan. I just wanted to mention to you, we can afford a really good health care for everybody, and this is proven in Europe, is by letting a lot of these, millions and millions of illegals that wear and tear our roads, that push us to hire more policemen. They use our parks. Then they send half of their income.
They actually have about half the crime rate of natural-born citizens, Bruce. You realize that?
Well, you have to remember, they're taking money away from people that live in these poor neighborhoods that could have taken their money, kept it here.
No, I know that's the sales pitch, and there is a certain amount of truth to it that white employers, wealthy white employers, have been using undocumented immigrant labor to bust unions. It happened all across the construction industry and the meatpacking industry, and to generally lower wages. And yeah, I get that, and that's why we need comprehensive immigration reform. But you're committed, Bruce, to demonizing the people themselves. Oh, it's those illegals, right? And, I get that as the right-wing meme, like, blame it on brown people. I get that. But it's wrong. It was Reagan who stopped enforcing the employer mandate, the requirement that if you are an employer in the United States and you hire somebody, you have to make sure that that person is a U.S. citizen. It was Reagan who stopped the enforcement of that. No president has restarted the enforcement of that. And I think it's because no president, no political party has been willing to take on corporate America. Corporate America is making a huge profit off this, off people being undocumented people being in this country. Corporate America is making a huge profit off people having no legal status, off people being terrified of ICE, because then they could say, oh, yeah, I told you I'd pay you $10 an hour, but, I've decided I'm only going to pay you $5. Take the $5 or I'm calling ICE. And it's not just that. I mean, you've got people being abused in the workplace. You've got people being, in unsafe work conditions, dying in the workplace. You've got people being exploited sexually, financially, every way you can imagine in the workplace, because because we haven't cracked down on employers. And because Republicans really like this situation where, they can demonize somebody. It used to be black people they used to say this to. Bruce, people like you used to call in to programs like this in the 1950s and talk about how black people want to take your job, and that's why we, and et cetera, et cetera. And that was the, and back then the unions were segregated, and that was the argument. It was a racial argument that was made. This is just, racism 101. Everybody gets that. And Republicans kind of like that, apparently. But I don't, frankly, I'm not having it. Amy in Madison, Wisconsin. Hey, Amy, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Tom. I saw two House committee people, Republicans, and they were talking about Medicaid, and they were using words like fee-for-service, and they didn't call it block granting. All they called it was more access.
Right. See, access is the magic word.
I think on Medicaid, and I can hardly wait till the CBO tells about it.
Yeah.
But do you know anything about this fee for service?
Well, fee for service is how our system works right now. You go to the doctor, you pay for that service. That's a fee for service, as opposed to like with the Veterans Administration, where the doctor gets a salary rather than a percentage of the fee that you're paying for the service. The hospital is paid for with tax dollars rather than the fee that you pay when you get an appendectomy. So fee for service simply means that they want to preserve the parts of the healthcare system that are basically typically for profit, that are based on people's spending rather than something else. If we were to take all of the health procedures in the United States, all the core healthcare, the primary healthcare costs, and say from now on the government is going to pay for all of this, so there's going to be one single payer, and it would still be fee for service, but that would save us $500 billion a year. We could probably save even more if our government were to buy the hospitals and we were to run it like the Veterans Administration, which has the highest satisfaction from its customers in the country. But that's my understanding, Amy, of what they're talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just think there's 70 million, I think, on Medicaid. I may be wrong. But then they said after they do this, no more people can be on Medicaid after a certain point.
Well, that's because they're going to block grant it to the states. So they're going to say to, you're in Wisconsin, they're going to say to Wisconsin, okay, you needed $25 million this year to pay for your Medicare people. Here's $25 million. By the way, next year, you're also going to get $25 million. In fact, we might even cut it down to $24 million. Whereas over the course of time, healthcare expenses will be going up. So, yeah, Medicaid is going to have to stop producing all the services it does.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Brian, watching Free Speech TV in Henderson, Texas. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Oh, not much. How's it going? Good to talk to you.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to just make a comment on your comment about Trump taking credit for the corporate expansions.
Right.
You know, yes, they may have been in play planned during Obama, but they didn't pull the trigger during Obama.
Actually, they did. ExxonMobil started that investment in 2012, and they have been continuously, hiring and buying. The United Auto Workers, the General Motor thing that Donald Trump took credit for, that was negotiated in 2014 by the union as part of the new contract that the company would make that investment. Virtually all that list that I read you, actually, I can read you the list again. These deals with Fiat Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, Intel, Lockheed Martin, Sprint, and Walmart, all of those not only were announced, but were funded before Trump. Now, you can argue that the Carrier one, where Mike Pence went to his state development fund and said, we're going to give Carrier a couple $100 million as a welfare payment, and in exchange for that, they're going to keep a couple hundred jobs in our state. And then Trump flew into Indiana and took credit for that. Yeah, you can give Trump and Pence credit for that, although it seems like kind of a stupid deal to give a company $1 million per job, and then the jobs only pay $40,000, $50,000 a year. It seems kind of crazy to me.
Well, I mean, the economic climate is improving. I don't know how anyone can argue against that.
I don't think I am. Brian, thanks a lot for the call. Steve in Richmond, Virginia. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Thanks for taking the call. First time caller.
Thank you for watching Free Speech. What's up?
I just got back from Florida, spent 2 weeks down there, and was reading the paper. And I saw in Florida where during the election, 160,000 people in Florida didn't vote for either person for president. Then I've also already read prior to that in Michigan, at least 10,000 people didn't vote.
No, it was 75,000 in Detroit who appeared not to have voted for president.
And I hear that it's almost 400,000 nationwide that didn't vote for anybody at the top box. Well, I've been a lifelong Democrat, and always been probably middle class, a little bit above middle class, I guess, wage-wise. I've always had a lot of empathy for the less fortunate, and always tried to help, fight for them when probably I've been better off in a lot of cases to support Republicans. However, I've always been a Democrat. But I bet you, I really hope that this is a good lesson for folks that couldn't make a decision in November.
I think they did, Steve. It appears, particularly with the Detroit vote, that the reason the presidential vote didn't show up is that the scanners, the voting machines that were scanning, the machines that were scanning these ballots were miscalibrated, so that it just, it wasn't picking up votes either for Democrats or for anybody for president. And this looks to me like the consequence of putting into poor communities crappy machines, knowing that they'll produce a bad result. In fact, when they tried to do the recount in Michigan, the reason that the judge shut down the recount was that the machines were so bad and so dysfunctional and so broken that you couldn't demonstrate that there was actually a good count to begin with that you could compare the secondary results against. So I don't think I don't think anybody stands in line for hours to vote and then doesn't vote for president. Or if they do, it's very, very few people. Steve, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Jill in Midway, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, first-time caller, or
Thank you.
First time I've gotten through, and I love your show. Thank you. You're keeping me sane.
Thank you, Jill.
Couple of things. You had mentioned you were talking to a lady about the Affordable Care Act or whatever is going on right now, and my husband's military, and you mentioned what great care that they get, and I want to say yes, they do. And I get so angry every time anybody complains about this. You hear about it and hear about it and hear about it through the Republicans complaining that we're not taking care of our vets. They're beating.
It's because they want to privatize the VA.
Exactly. That's exactly right. But do they want to privatize their insurance? No. They get it from the same basic place.
Right.
But the Veterans Administration takes wonderful care. Overall, there are always going to be problems because human beings are involved. But in general, they give wonderful care. And they saved my life. And and my husband's eye, and I could go on and on.
Yeah,
so.
And this is socialized medicine. I mean, the VA, the doctors are employees of the government, and the hospitals are owned by the government. That's socialized medicine. And
absolutely, it is payer. We need a single payer system. People do not understand who's out there fighting for the other side. It's not the little guy. It is the people who make so much money off of healthcare. When the insurance companies that have healthcare companies are making huge profits,
record profits
every year. Not that money isn't going into the healthcare system; it's going into their pockets. And
That's right.
We really need to look at this. We need to understand it, and people don't understand it.
That's right. Very, very well said, Jill. Jill, thank you for the call. Thank you for sharing your experience with us and for the insightful voice of actual experience. It's remarkable. Thank you, Jill. Mel in Cary, North Carolina. Hey, Mel, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a lot of topics on my mind, but I know that you only
pick one.
Just pick one. Okay. This country was built on compromise, especially the Constitution. That's the greatest document, I think, of compromise. Could be in the history of man.
Well, yes and no. It was a compromise around the details, but there was no compromise on the principles, at least for white men. I mean, they were pretty ferocious about those principles, at least for white men.
I don't want to stay on the Constitution. That's kind of like my preamble.
Okay.
What I want to stay on is that since Roe versus Wade, 1973, if you really look at it generally speaking, the Democrats have just lost a lot of power. Governments, governors, senators, and they may gain some power during Clinton, and then they lost the Congress, and they may gain some power during Obama, and they lost the Congress. It just seems that the Democrats can't get a grip on the country like they did during FDR and Truman, and even Eisenhower was sort of a moderate. You would consider him almost a moderate Democrat.
Yeah.
This country, the Democratic Party has lost power since Roe versus Wade.
Well, it's not just since Roe v. Wade. Mel, if you're trying to suggest that decriminalizing abortion caused the Democratic Party to lose power, I would strongly disagree. I would say that the main thing that caused the Democratic Party to lose power was the Powell memo in 1971, Lewis Powell being put on the Supreme Court in 72, and then his authoring the Buckley case in 76, which allowed billionaires to buy politicians. The Republican Party saw that as an opportunity and leaped at it. The Reagan administration in 1980, 81 rather, turned it into a religion. And it's been off to the races ever since. And there was an attempt to catch up by the Democratic Party. And this was Bill Clinton and the DLC and Al Fromm and all these guys of, okay, we will do the same thing the Republicans are, only we're going to do it with, the less toxic businesses rather than the more toxic businesses. But that didn't work out with the Democratic Party for the simple reason, as Harry Truman said, when people are presented with a choice between a Democrat who behaves like a Republican or a real Republican, they'll always take the real Republican. The flip side of that, obviously, is that if they're faced with a choice between a Republican who behaves like a Democrat and a real Democrat, they'll always choose the real Democrat. And that's the struggle that the Democratic Party is dealing with right now, is whether they're going to go back to their FDR, LBJ roots or whether they're going to stay with the third way DLC strategy. And there are some people who say that the two are compatible. I think that to some extent they are. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to find that they're mutually incompatible. Mel, thanks for the call. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Three quick things on healthcare. Tag on the previous caller. The VA was rated by RAND Corporation, Independent Statistical Analysis and Survey Corporation, in 2010 as the top-rated healthcare delivery system in the country for appropriateness of treatment, best outcomes, and cost effectiveness. That was just in 2010. The VA.
Right, socialized medicine.
Yeah. Second thing is there is a way to do single payer that's not fee for service. Fee for service is what is the number one thing that's driving up costs.
Right.
And the model for this is actually already getting started. It's called an accountable care organization. And what is done is for instance, a corporation, I think Intel Corporation contracts with Presbyterian Healthcare in Phoenix. And what they do is they just contract with the healthcare organization, or the healthcare organization is both the provider and the insurer.
Right. Kaiser's been doing this for decades.
Yeah. So what happens is once you strike a deal, the corporation, or in our what we want for single payer is the state. Right. The state would contract with the hospitals for so much money, and the way the hospital makes money is by cutting their costs.
Right.
By learning to cut their costs instead of just freewheeling it, just however much anything, they just let costs get out of control. And the third thing is here, everything that such as that the Republicans have put in the replacement is bound to drive costs and premiums up for everyone, whereas the Obamacare, the exchanges, essentially insulated most of the market because the people who were very sick and were just getting on health care for the first time had subsidies, and the high-risk corridors were subsidized by the federal subsidy reimbursements until Marco Rubio put the poison pill into that. So now that they are going to not have a mandate but still have keep pre-existing conditions, well, this is just going to drive adverse selection, which drives up costs and premiums. And then the other thing with block granting Medicaid is people who are sick and typically are poor. The poor people tend to be somewhat less healthy for a number of reasons. They won't buy health insurance anyway. So what's going to happen is the hospitals end up not getting paid in all cases. And so what do? They raise their rates.
Right.
And then everybody pays through increased insurance premiums because the hospitals raise their rates for everyone.
Right. And the real easy solution to all of this is a combination of single payer and contracting for service. Here's my concern about contracting for services, Paul, is that if you still have for-profit hospitals, even some not-for-profits, they may dial back, in order to save money.
Right.
You may find that they're sacrificing standards.
Well, they have. That is a point. We have to evaluate the care. So that's then that's the thing, though. Is this what the state will do?
So you pay for outcome.
If their care evaluation gets a low rating, then they're not going to get paid.
Right.
They're not going to be. The state won't contract. They only contract with high standards of care. So that's. I mean, they have to be evaluated. Obviously, if you're a lousy hospital, people won't do business with you. But in a way, Tom, this has to happen before people know that we have a choice. We can either have this kind of what the Republicans. We can have that, or we can be on our way to a better system. You know the old saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And you don't miss your water until your wells run dry. So maybe that has to happen.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's happening right in front of us. I mean, the Republicans are running around like a bad Three Stooges movie here, bouncing off each other and going, woo, 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 woo. iPhones. Woo, 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 woo. Anyhow, Paul, thanks a lot for the call. Sorry to dump a sillyism on you there. But it is. I mean, this has the potential to tear the Republican Party apart, because you've got some Republicans who actually, maybe one anyway, Susan Collins, who actually want to do the right thing for the people. And then you've got a whole bunch of Republicans who think that, the government has no business in health care whatsoever. So pull out 100% and just hand all that stuff over, hand us all over to the tender mercies of the healthcare industry and the health insurance industry. I tend to think not. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. Tag You're It. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.